right, so here we are. We are now at the point where we're going to discuss a couple of things related to Resurrection Sunday. We are in what in most of Christianity refers to as Holy Week. So tonight we're going to be looking at the Passover, the Triumphal Entry, the Crucifixion and Resurrection of Jesus, all thrown into one. So we won't be able to go into as much detail as we've gone into, but if you look back a couple of weeks when we did Luke chapter 23 and Luke chapter 24, we went into great detail. And then we went in even into the essential, which we won't get to this week. But just a little news and notes update. It turns out that the regional director for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Noah, who you know, Steve, has looked at our website and was very impressed by it. And we have been invited to do our evangelism proselytization at the race that we're going to all be competing in. So they're going to give us a table and a couple of chairs, and I think we have to bring our own. We bring our own materials, and I think we're gonna bring our same South Beach stuff. He said, "Herbie, I'm really impressed with your whole South Beach thing, man. I'm supporting you." And so God bless Noah, man. He just came up and called me the other day and said, "We're gonna try to help you promote your program. So set up a table, bring your materials, and boom." And so, I had to do the logo design for the shirt yesterday because the printer wanted it by 4 p.m. And so we got to pray for the Lord that we can get a donor to, donate the money to pay for the sponsorship fee thing that I got to get in. But the shirts, I threw my hat over the wall. So the shirts are being done regardless. So we come getting sued by FCA for the shirt fee, or whatever. The shirts will get paid. And so that'll be on April 16th.
Okay.
The Glory Run 5K for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So Genevieve, I didn't know whether you were going to be running in the race or not, but you'll be working at the table.
Yes.
So we'll go early, set up our stuff just like we do for South Beach, and then Genevieve will sit at the table to watch the materials and hand out stuff. Because even though it's a Christian sponsored race, a lot of the people that participate in it aren't actually born again Christians. Some of them are former Roman Catholics, some of them are ecumenical Catholics that like to hang out with other Christians. So there'll be a bunch of people there, and many of them probably aren't actually born again. So the materials that we have will be of great use. So we'll have Genevieve doing the table while we're running, and then we'll come back and help her out after it's over.
What's that date again, Herb?
April 16th.
Is it 16?
Saturday.
16?
Yeah.
April 16th. No, April 16th is like a Tuesday. Maybe.
Then it's April. It's that whatever that's at.
That's Saturday. Okay.
That's not the 16th?
I know the 16th because the 17th is tax day, and tax day is on a Tuesday.
Well, let me just double check it. I apologize. I got my calendar right here. And we are looking at April. Yes, you're right. 21st. I'm sorry.
21st. Okay.
21st. I was thinking of the 14th because the Michigan spring game.
Oh,
The week before. 21st. Yeah.
Okay.
21st. April 21st for that. So anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing. That's a great opportunity for us. And the logo idea with the shirt up to put the.
He came to you.
Huh?
He came to you.
Well, he talking about doing a sponsorship FCA for the law firm that I've done in the past, and I said, hey, what if I do it just for my little
ministry
my little ministry that I do on Thursday nights? He's like, oh. Yes, you're dime, you do what you want. So I signed thing, got it to him, and he was like, man, I checked it out. I was really impressed. I think this is something that should be promoted to the community. So there are going to be a lot of people from the, the business community, a lot of the, there's a number of corporate sponsors that show up every year for the event. And, when I started, we planned it out like 5 years ago, and it's been going pretty well so far. So, but enough of that. I just wanted to let you guys know that all our supporters out on the internet land know what we're doing. Expanding out. Jenny was telling me that we had something like over 7,500 views of our videos of this Thursday night meeting, which shocks me since I only know like 20 people that actually come. I don't know who those other 7,480 people are, but they're out there. So I figure with our little web address on the shirts, and I'm going to try to get some handbills printed up by then to put into the bags, and that should promote our program, even more generally.
I don't know how you got there, but you are on the front page of the Google.
Now, the front page of Google, I've been trying to pay people to get my law firm on front page of Google for 5 years, and I've never been able to be successful. I cannot believe, so you checked it out on Google,
I went
South Beach Gospel.
2-3 times, yes.
It's on the front page. See, now the Lord is doing stuff with
Yes.
people
Yeah.
apart from our knowledge, because I'm aware of like 6 people that watch it, and there's over 7,500 people that are actually, that I don't know, that are watching it. So we're doing a good work. So without further ado, we're gonna put some more work in. So this is Holy Week, right? So here's the thing, here's the exciting thing, and some of this will be reviewed, but this bears being reviewed. Okay, so turns out that, as I explained to you guys a few weeks ago, that the Passover and crucifixion of Jesus and all of that, I remember I talked to you about how Jesus couldn't have been crucified on a Friday because you wouldn't have 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, and how I said that there was a special Sabbath, which was the beginning of the Passover week, which is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Like Christmas, it rotates 1 day every year. So if Christmas is on Saturday 1 year, it'll be on Sunday the next year, it'll be on Monday 2 years later, and so on and so forth, until you go through the 7-day cycle. The same is true with the beginning of Passover. As it turns out, in Nisan, on Nisan 10, which is the day of the Triumphal entry, in 32 AD, that same week, Passover began on a Thursday, right? And so, as it turns out, we end up having the Passover actually begins on a Friday, and so what you would have to have is Jesus being crucified on the preceding Thursday, because that day, Thursday, after sundown, the Passover would begin. So you technically actually would have the special Sabbath Passover being on a Friday, and that's what we had in 25 AD, we had it in 32 AD, and guess what? We have it this year. Passover this year begins on Friday, just like in 32 AD. So this is a great exemplar for you guys for when we talked about how we know it's a Thursday crucifixion, how Good Friday is a pagan holiday that's promoted by the Catholic Church. So, looking back, this past Sunday would have been, and I remember I was talking to Ingrid earlier this week about how she went to a service on Sunday. She said, the pastor didn't even mention the Triumphal entry. What the freak is going on? I want my money back, you know?
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, you know, and she went to like kind of a well-known church or whatever, and they didn't even bother mentioning that this is the day that we commemorate what? The conclusion of the 69 weeks of Daniel, where Jesus was prophesied over 1,000 years in advance to have to ride into Jerusalem to present himself to be the Passover sacrifice. And Ingrid had spoke to me about a week or so ago as well, and she was like, well, wait, you keep talking about Nisan 10, but doesn't it say in Scripture that the Passover lamb has to be slain on the 14th? And I was like, that's a very good question, because she's paying attention.
Mhm.
The Passover lamb has to be slain on the 14th of Nisan. Why? Because that's the day it says in Exodus, in Leviticus, and that's the day the Lord picked, whatever. And so he says, well, but then Nisan 10, 445 BC to Nisan 10, 32 AD, that's not, 483 years or 69 weeks of years, weeks to the day, or 483 prophetic years to the day, because you're off by 4 days. And then I said, no, but if you remember also in Exodus it says that the Passover lamb that's sacrificed on Nisan 14 that week has to be presented to the priests at the temple 4 days in advance to be observed for a ritual 4-day period to make sure that it was spotless and pure. So you had to present the lamb for slaying. The lamb that was going to get killed got put in the queue on Nisan 10.
Right.
And then got observed by the high priest for 4 days, and then on the 4th day, like, okay, it didn't die of hoof-and-mouth disease, it didn't, start having rabies and all, so we can use it on the 14th as the sacrifice, because otherwise God would reject an impure sacrificial lamb. And the same is true of Jesus. So in 32 AD, just like this year, Palm Sunday would have been this past Sunday, Jesus would ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, 32 AD, to present himself for what? To be the Passover lamb that would be slain and sacrificed on Nisan 14. Nisan 14 was 4 days later. And then the day after that would be a Friday in 32 AD, which would normally not be the Sabbath for the Jews. That would be a special day for Muslims, but the Jews venerated Saturday as the Sabbath. So when we look at John, in the sense they had to take the body of Jesus down from the cross because the Passover was about to begin, or the Sabbath was about to begin. What Sabbath are they talking about? Well, the Catholic Church thinks they're talking about the Saturday Sabbath, so that's why they came up with the concept of Good Friday. They said, well, if the Sabbath was about to begin, then it must have been Friday they got crucified because the Sabbath is Saturday. But the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day of the Passover week, is also a Sabbath. It's a special high Sabbath. And John gives us a little more clarification than either Luke, Matthew, or Mark does. And he says, now that day was an high day, meaning a special Sabbath. So just like this year, we would have the concept of a contiguous Sabbath. In 32 AD, you had a regular Sabbath on a Saturday, but it was preceded by the special Sabbath that previous Friday, which means Jesus, if he's being crucified, has to be crucified on a Thursday. At sundown, the Friday special Sabbath is about to start, so they had to hurry up and put him in the tomb. Another interesting point that we're going to talk about, and we'll look at, and that same timing is true this year. So this year, for the Jewish people here in Miami Beach, you're going to see a lot of people that tomorrow will be acknowledging the beginning of the week called Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Passover will begin on a Friday, which will be the special Sabbath. So, if we were in 32 AD, then Jesus would have ridden into Jerusalem, use Miami Beach where we're at right now as a contemporary example. If Jesus were going to be riding to Miami Beach to get crucified, he would have rode into town on, Harley or whatever, would be the contemporary moped probably, for like a humble Galilean, preacher, and he would have shown up on Sunday. That would have been the day of the triumphal entry into the city. That's Palm Sunday, because they grabbed palm fronds and they waved them and said, Hosanna, blessed be the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Okay, let's say that would have happened last Sunday. And then, today is what? Today is Thursday, right? We have our regular Thursday night house church Bible study every Thursday, 7 to 9. Sometimes we start a few minutes after 7, but we do that every week, right? So that means that the Last Supper, where the upper room discourse, John chapter 14, where Jesus said, in my Father's house there are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to prepare a place for you so that if I go away, I will come again and receive you to myself so that where I am, there you be also. The first time that the rapture is revealed in clear, concise language is really in the upper room discourse at the Last Supper. The Last Supper is also confused by the Catholic Church, conflated with the Passover. The Passover isn't the Last Supper that Jesus shared with the disciples. It was the preparation for the Passover. It was Christmas Eve that Jesus was celebrating with his disciples. So in Mark, where it says, how I've longed to eat this Passover with you, he's making reference to the entire week, the special holiday week, where he is going to be the main course in the feast. He can't eat the feast. He is the feast. So Jesus would have had his Last Supper this past Wednesday night. And he would have been in the upper room, at the Days Inn down on South Beach or something, with his disciples Wednesday night. And then, after Wednesday night, after about, dinner would go from maybe 6 to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, they sang some hymns and stuff like that. And then remember, they went out to the Garden of Gethsemane at about midnight. So Wednesday into what for us would be now Thursday morning, Jesus would have been in the Garden of Gethsemane this past Wednesday night into the early morning hours of Thursday. And since today is Thursday, today would have been the day that Jesus had his trial. He would have had his Sanhedrin trials and his trial with Herod at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. He got arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane at about midnight, and then he gets taken over, and he's taken to the high priest first. And he has like 2 or 3 trials. First with Annas, and then with Caiaphas, the high priest, the former high priest, and then the current high priest. And then they send him to Pilate, and Pilate says, wait a minute, this guy is he's from Galilee, he's under the jurisdiction of Herod. And so they sent him up to see Herod, you remember, and he wanted to see him perform some magic tricks. And since he didn't, and he didn't speak to him at all, he said, he didn't do anything interesting, send him back to Pilate. And then he goes back to Pilate, and he has a second trial with Pilate. All of that happened today, Thursday, from about 12 midnight till about 6 in the morning. These trials are going back and forth between these really four individuals, Caiaphas, Annas, Herod, and Pilate. And he's having several trials. And Pilate acquits him, but then leaves it up to a vote of the people. And remember, at the Praetorium, a place called the Gabbatha, or the pavement, the people came and they voted for Barabbas, who was a murderer and a thief. And Jesus had to be condemned to be crucified because Pilate was trying to get Jesus off the hook by saying, hey, isn't there a loophole in the law that I can release one of you, the captives, in honor of your Passover, which was coming up? And sure enough, he thought they were going to vote for Jesus because Jesus was healing the sick, raising the dead, doing all kinds of wonderful things. So he figured, no, they'll pick Jesus and he'll go free and I won't have to put him to death. They picked Barabbas instead because it was ordained far in advance, as far back as Genesis chapter 3, that Jesus would have to die to pay for the sins of the world. Because Adam fell, listened to the voice of his wife instead of the voice of his God, the entire human race is born into the curse of sin. And so, what we find out is that would have happened during those trials from about 3 in the morning. Illegal to have trials in Israel after sundown, but they were doing it anyway, so the trials were illegal anyway. Then he gets finally convicted, and then he gets put on the cross at about, we find out through scripture, at about 9 in the morning. So as you were driving to work this morning and doing whatever it was you were doing at 9 a.m., that's about the time that he first gets put on the cross. And he's hanging on the cross from 9 until 12, and then at 12 noon, what happens? That special supernatural event, darkness at noon, where God's wrath is now about to come down on Jesus, and he darkens the earth so that, it's such a shameful event that God himself is going to have to be punished for the sins of fallen man, that God puts a curtain over the scene by making it turn totally dark like midnight in the middle of the day. A supernatural event. And so that would have happened from 12 noon till 3 p.m. And then at 3 p.m. Jesus announces those famous words, those accounting term words that were used by the Jewish and Greek accountants, tetelestai, which means paid in full. And he says, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. It is accomplished. So he finished paying off the sin debt of Adam and all of Adam's children during that period of time on the cross from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., specifically, especially from 12 noon to 3 p.m. And when it was done, then he allowed his body to die. And then he says, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. It is accomplished, boom, and then he drops over and dies. And it's from that point, they're like, uh-oh, it's almost sundown. And sure enough, here in Miami Beach, the sun just went down, there's a full moon in the sky, and they're like, uh-oh, before sundown, we can't do any work on the Sabbath. And since the Passover is the special Sabbath, the Passover, the special Sabbath, isn't going to happen on Saturday, it's going to happen on Friday, which starts in just a few minutes. So they had from about 3 p.m. till about 6 p.m. to find a place to bury him, get him off the cross, get permission from Pilate to have him buried in Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, and that's exactly what they did. So it took them about 3 hours to get all that arranged. So that's why when they got the body of Jesus into the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, in fulfillment of the prophecy that said what? That Jesus would be buried in the tomb of a rich man. And Joseph of Arimathea was a very wealthy, influential member of the Sanhedrin, and he volunteered to let him have his burial plot. But it didn't, it wasn't such a big deal because he was only going to borrow it for 3 days, and then he could get it back, right? So he didn't have to give it permanently. So he loaned it to him for 3 days. Yeah. And so that's exactly what happened. So by sundown tonight, so where we're at right now, if we were in 32 AD, we would be celebrating the Passover Seder. After sundown, then the Passover would begin. Because now you would go from a Thursday night And again, in 32 AD, you had the special Sabbath, the Passover, starting on Friday, which would start at 6 p.m. on Thursday night. 6:01, it would be Friday, the Passover. So Jesus is on the cross at 3. But remember, while Jesus is on the cross on Thursday, earlier today, what else will be happening throughout the land of Israel?
The Passover lamb would be.
The Passover lambs that got presented to the temple on Palm Sunday, Nisan 10, will have reached their 4-day observation period, and they would be ritually slain. Their throats would be slit, and the blood would be poured out into a bowl and poured on the altar in the temple. And that would be happening in the afternoon on Thursday at the same time that Jesus was being crucified. After they were ritually slain and blooded, and the blood is put on the altar, then their flesh would be eaten later that night after sundown for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Passover supper. That's the meal that Jesus didn't get to celebrate with his disciples because he was the Passover. So at the same time, the Passover lambs were being slain throughout the land of Israel. Jesus was being crucified on the cross. And at the same time, hours later, that the Passover lambs throughout the land of Israel that had been ritually slain after being observed from Nisan 10 for 4 days, they were being eaten by the people. Jesus was in the tomb. Remember, at his Last Supper, he said, behold, I'm starting a new covenant. This bread is my body. My body is bread and my blood is drink, and you're partaking in every time you do communion now, every time you do the Passover, remember me and the sacrifice that I made to you. So that's a quick overview of what we're at. So right now, we will be sitting down enjoying the Passover supper, and most of the Jewish people, I've gone to Jewish seders, and they do it because it's ritual, it's because it's in the law of Moses, but they don't really understand what it's about. And it's interesting to see them doing all these ritualistic ceremonies and never being able to really explain it. But then when you do it with a Messianic Jew who understands that Jesus is the Passover, they can explain it in such detail and gives it so much more meaning and richness. And so that's exactly what's going to be happening, especially on Miami Beach, where we have such a Hasidic Jewish population here, and throughout the world, in Israel and throughout the world. The Jews will be celebrating the Passover Seder, and tomorrow we'll start the week of Passover. And many of them don't understand why we're doing these strange rituals with killing these poor little lambs. But God said to do it, it makes them happy, and if it expiates our sin for another year, we'll do it. Except there isn't a temple where you can go and do the blood sacrifice. You can't get the blood sacrifice down. You can kill the lamb and eat them, but you can't blood them and take the blood to the temple because you don't have the ritually pure, first off, lambs anymore, and you don't have a temple where you can do the blood. So now Israel has no way to do a sacrifice. They have no way to atone for their sins. They have no way to ameliorate the sin debt that they owe to the Lord. And that's because God intentionally removed the temple from service after Jesus completed his death on the cross. He then, what? He then tore the veil of the temple from top to bottom, and that showed that no more blood sacrifices would be allowed at the temple. God wasn't accepting. They still did it the next year and the year after that, but it didn't count for God because he tore the veil. He had departed from there. Now God is going to dwell not in a building, but in the hearts of man, because now the hearts of men were cleansed by the blood of Jesus at the cross. Say that again,
And he could live there. He could actually stay.
Right, so he didn't have to live in a building anymore.
Right.
He could move out of the low rent district and move into the temple that he always wanted in the first place, which is the human heart. And so that's what we're going to look at. So what we're going to try to do, we're going to take a look at our triumphal entry, and we're going to tie that in to the 70th week of Daniel. And again, like I said, we've gone into great detail over a lot of these things in the past, but what we're going to do is, give you sort of an overview of everything so that as we go through this Holy Week and as we approach Sunday, which is Resurrection Sunday, not Easter. Remember, we talk about how we don't use the term Easter, not to be a stick in the mud or give the Roman Catholics a hard time or to be obnoxious or anything like that, but Easter is really an anglicized version of the name of the ancient pagan fertility sky goddess. Semiramis, and then Semiramis took on different identities. In Egypt, she was Isis, and then for the Phoenicians, she was Ishtar, and then for the other the Moabites, she was Ashtaroth, and so Ishtar, Ashtaroth, and then eventually Easter, which is sort of a anglicized version of the name Ashtaroth or Esther. She was referred to also as Easter. Is just another way of saying Ashtaroth, or Astarte, or Semiramis. And so we wouldn't want to use those terms. And that's why you have Easter eggs and little bunnies tied into the Sunday celebration. You have these Easter egg hunts at the White House and at churches throughout America because they have secretly been syncretized with Babylonian paganism, and they don't even know it. So when I was a kid, and I go down the street, I would go to a Baptist church, and I also go to a Pentecostal church, which was right down the street from my grandmother and great-grandmother went to. And then, they had hellfire and brimstone preaching, but on Sunday, they had Easter eggs and colored eggs and chocolate bunnies. But nobody knew that this isn't a Christian thing, and we even had sunrise service. You go to the park, West Park, man, overlooking beautiful, overlooking hills and all that, and we sit and wait for the sun to come up. And that was a pagan practice as well. It was the sun god worship of the sun god Helios in Egypt, or Baal in the different ancient civilizations. And the Egyptians refer to Horus as the sun god, and then Osiris, his father, was the original sun god after after Nimrod was killed. Remember, supposedly he became resurrected as the sun, and then he shot a beam of light into his wife and impregnated her, and so he was now reincarnated as the sun and impregnated his wife with a beam of sunlight. And when she gave birth to her son, Tammuz, who eventually became Horus in Egypt, it was the reincarnation of Osiris, who was originally Nimrod, and that's how that whole mythos began. And so we talk about all these things because it's really important to lay these things out and make sure that we, as born-again believers who are mature in the faith, that we can properly explain these things to the people. So why don't we start out by, let's say, you can never go wrong by starting out with Genesis. Genesis chapter 3, and we're going to have Steve run through that and run down right through Genesis chapter 1 through Genesis chapter 15. It lays down for us. Oh, cool shades. Look at Jada. She's got the stylish, sporty little shades. We've got, in Genesis, we see what is the reason for the triumphal entry. The triumphal entry, the reason for that is for the Passover lamb to be presented to the priests of Israel so that they can present it to God and observe it for 4 days so he can be the sacrificial lamb. To do what? To atone for the sins of the people that we inherited from our forefather Adam. The original Adam is the reason that the whole human race is in sin. That's why there had to be, after the first man Adam, there had to be a second man who the Bible calls the last Adam. And that last Adam, the second man, is none other than Jesus, who undoes the curse. He reverses the curse of the original man Adam. And so, Steve, run through Genesis chapter 3 for us, 1 through 15, and then we'll talk about it.
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, as God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God had said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord amongst the trees of the garden. And the Lord God called unto Adam and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou was naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat? And the man said, The woman whom thou gavest to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And the Lord God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, thou art cursed above all cattle, and above every beast of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel.
So there you have the prophecy in Genesis chapter 3:15, of the Messiah who is going to be the virgin-born God-man, the seed of the woman. When we don't have seed, that's a reference that the Holy Spirit is making to us to alert us that this Messiah will be born without the sperm cells of a human man, so that the sin that is carried through the apparent Y chromosome of Adam, who he passes on to all of his sons, it was cut out of the equation. The Holy Spirit gets a virgin girl pregnant, and she gives birth, and this person, who will be the seed of the woman, will crush the head of the serpent. So we find out that this is the very first messianic prophecy in all of Scripture. And it says that he'd come along, he'd get his heel bruised in the process of crushing the head of the serpent, which is the devil who caused the fall in the Garden of Eden. So that is a veiled reference to the future, yet future at that point in time, crucifixion of Jesus, which wouldn't occur for another 4,000 years from that point. And so, okay, there's your sin problem. Okay, so now we're going to roll forward to the prophet Daniel in his time in Babylon during the Babylonian captivity, about, in the 500s BC, and he picks up and he gets a message from God via Gabriel the archangel about this weird thing of 70 weeks. And by the way, parenthetically, the birth date, Independence Day for Israel, is May 14th of every year. And it turns out that this year, May 14th, 2018, is the 70th anniversary of the nation of Israel since it came back into the land again. So some people out there, I was joking around with one of my friends who doesn't believe in the rapture, who is a Christian. I say, yeah, well, I'll come to your thing next summer, if we're still after the rapture. Some people think that this would be a perfect time for the rapture to occur because you'll have that 70 years fulfilled. So, and I think I talked about the timing of the rapture before, how, I said in the past, you count 70 years from 1948, that would put you at 2018. Mm-hmm. But if you needed the 70th week of Daniel to occur, that you'd have to subtract out 70 years, and so you'd have 2011 that the rapture would have to occur by. Unless those passages, and I looked at them again yesterday, well, that means that maybe the rapture could occur within the 70 years and the Antichrist could be revealed. Because remember when Jesus in Matthew 24 says, this generation shall not pass away until all these things come to pass. And so if you're thinking that all these things that Jesus just made reference to is including the second coming and the establishment of the kingdom, which really isn't laid out in detail in Matthew 24. On the other hand, if all the stuff that Jesus had just talked about, which includes the 70th week of Daniel and the rise of the Antichrist, if all these things will come to pass within 70 years, or this generation won't pass away until the rise of the Antichrist, as opposed to the finishing of the Antichrist in the second coming, then maybe you could have the rapture starting at the 70-year point, and then you have another 70 years of the Antichrist ruling on earth, because the rise of the Antichrist, if it occurred within the 70 years, and that generation saw all the things, the apostasy in the church and the rise of the Antichrist could be what Jesus was talking about. So there's some people, some serious students of the Bible that think that it is a potential possibility that the 70 years, the generation that Jesus talked about, because in the Bible, 70 years is a generation. Now, there are other lengths of time, 40 years, 100 years, but the most frequent reference to a generation is a 70-year time frame in the Bible, though there are others. So we can't know for sure. That way you can't time the rapture for sure. But certainly it gives a lot of people a lot of excitement thinking that we're approaching May 14th, and that would be a guy, I was looking at a guy who's, a website that has some great Bible prophecy related stuff. He pointed out today, he said, this will be, the first Passover, once it begins, the very first Passover ever since, the 70 years of Israel. Israel has been around for 70 years. So this will be the first Passover during their 70th year. And so if you, attach any special prophetic significance to the Passover, because the Passover really is a veiled reference to the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. This guy saying, hey, these are especially significant prophetic dates. We're going through the very first Passover season during the 70th anniversary of Israel. If the 70 years reference to a generation in Matthew 24 is referring to a generation from 1948, then goodness forbid, maybe this is the year that the rapture occurs. Who knows? We won't find out until we get to January 1st of next year, when we'll know that 2018 wasn't the year. But the idea is to stay ready and to stay alert. So, we can get our FCA run in and do our evangelism and pub up our website
You ready right
April
up, man?
21st, and then 3 weeks later, we get to go home in the rapture, and we'll be done. All the hard work will be over. All the tiring, hard, long work. So, anyway, so we've laid the foundation for why we need a Passover lamb to atone for the sins of Adam. So now, God says what? He said, finish reading, just throw in Genesis chapter 16 as well.
Chapter 16 or verse 16?
Verse 16, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee.
And that was 16, right?
That's 16.
Okay, and to Adam, what did he say?
And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and have eaten of the tree, of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it, cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life.
So death and a cursing of creation itself is a result of Adam's sin. Now all of the universe is under the curse of sin. Everything in the universe dies now. Animals die, people die, cosmic entropy is spread throughout the universe because of Adam's listening to the voice of his wife. So now we need an atonement. But the good news was that this curse of Adam, the curse of sin of Adam, that lasted from the beginning of the fall in the garden and will continue out all the way through 6,000 years of human history until the second coming and the beginning of the millennial reign of Christ when he comes back to the earth. We got 6,000 years of suffering, and we're in that 6,000th year now. Now, if you would, Genevieve, lay out for us what the good news was, because there was some good news that was delivered to Daniel while he was in the final stages of what? There was a 70-year period of captivity in Babylon. And at the conclusion of the 70 years of captivity in Babylon, an angel came from God to tell Daniel of another 70-year period, a 70 weeks of years prophecy, which would really total 490 total years, 70 weeks of years. Remember, we found out that a week is a unit of 7. So if you have a week of days, you have 7 days in a week. If you have a week of years, you have 7 years in a week. So Daniel is told 70 weeks of years. That means 70 times 7, or 490 years, prophetically speaking, are given to the people until what? Until the everlasting righteousness of the kingdom of God is established on earth. But it turned out that 490 years was divided out into 2 sections. 483 years, followed by a gap. The gap was filled with the church, the age of grace. And then after the rapture, after the church age ends, the final 70th week of years, or the last 7 years, where Antichrist will be able to rule on earth, and Satan will be given his day, his fair day in court, and God's going to give him enough room to fail, and then bring in judgment. So, read for us if you would, Daniel chapter 9, verses 24 through 26.
7 weeks are determined upon thy people.
Start again, because I couldn't hear you. Say
70 weeks.
70?
70 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, 70.
70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision of prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built and the wall, even the troublous time. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city.
Okay, that's good enough right there. Okay, so here we find out that there's a prophecy about 70 weeks. Verse 24, 70 weeks are determined for your people to finish transgression, make an end of sin, bring in reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision and the prophecy. And then, Gabriel gives more detail and says, know this and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, or 69 weeks of years, where the wall will be rebuilt again. And so, in verse 25, we get the prophecy related to the 69 weeks of years as separated out from the 70 weeks of years that we had in verse 24. So, those 69 weeks of years, 62 plus 7 gives you 69 weeks of years. We find out that during this 69 weeks of years, from the going forth of the command until the arrival of who? Messiah the Prince. And it says that Messiah the Prince will show up. There'll be 69 weeks of years, or as it's stated, it's broken down in sort of algebraic terms, after the 7 weeks and 62 weeks, the street shall be rebuilt again. And then in verse 26, after the 62 weeks, Messiah shall be cut off. And cut off, the Hebrew term there in verse 26 is karat, which means killed. So we're finding out from Daniel chapter 24 and 25 and 26 that there is a time frame that the Messiah would show up to the day after 69 weeks of years. 69 weeks of years is 483 years. 69 weeks of years and 483 years is 173,880 days. So Robert Anderson did a great job in doing his research in Scotland Yard. He also was a Christian and a mathematician, and he's able to lay down and get the calendars from the Greenwich time calendar or whatever in London, and was able to determine that the day where Nisan 10 in what day, what year, 445 BC, something special happened then. Artaxerxes Longimanus, who was then the ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire, which succeeded the Babylonian Empire, on Nisan 10, 445 BC, he gave a decree for the Jews to be able to restore and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. We find that referenced in Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 5 through 8. So from that day forward, now we have a starting point. We can count forward 69 weeks of years, or 483 years, or as Sir Robert Anderson was able to find out, 173,880 360-day years, or 483 360-day years, comes out to be 173,880 days. If you count that forward from Nisan 10, or 445 BC, it lands you in Nisan 10 of 32 AD, or April 6 of 445 BC to April 6 of 32 AD. And in 32 AD, we find out that that is none other than what we now make reference to as Palm Sunday. On Nisan 10 and 32 AD, Messiah actually did show up. Not to be crucified that day, but to be presented to the nation for crucifixion. But he had to be held in the waiting area and be observed for 4 days before he could actually be the Passover sacrifice. And so what do we find out happening? The most amazing prophecy in the Bible, we find out that after the 69 weeks of years, or after 483 years, Jesus shows up riding on a donkey in, on Palm Sunday, or on the Sunday prior to his crucifixion. And he's, during his 3-year earthly ministry, he's, staying in different places, sleeping under the stars, working primarily out of Galilee and Nazareth. And we find out during the last week of his life, he presents himself in the temple, even though he's warned by Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, those guys that really liked him, were on his side, say, hey, you got enemies in the Sanhedrin, they're upset with you, lay low and stay out of town. And he was like, no, now it's time. Now is the time to present myself. So we find out that Jesus does just the opposite of what he was advised to do. He actually goes forward to present himself as the Passover lamb, because we find out that the Messiah had to be presented and had to be observed for a period of time so that he could fulfill that very thing. So what we'll do is let's have you, Steve, pop over to Luke chapter 19 and read verses 28 through 44 for us.
And when he had thus spoken, he went before, ascending up to Jerusalem. And it came to pass, when he was come nigh to Bethpage and Bethany, at the mount called the Mount of Olives, he sent 2 of his disciples, saying, Go ye unto the village over against you, in which at your entering ye shall find a colt tied, and whereon yet never man sat. Loose him, and bring him hither. And if any man ask you, Why do ye loose him? Thus shall ye say unto him, Because the Lord hath need of him. And they that were sent went their way, and found even as he had said unto them. And as they were loosing the colt, the owners thereof said unto them, Why loose ye the colt? And they said, The Lord hath need of him. And they brought him to Jesus, and they cast their garments upon the colt, and they set Jesus thereon. And as he went, they spread their clothes in the way. And when he was come nigh, even now at the descent of the Mount of Olives, the whole multitude of the disciples began to rejoice and praise God with a loud voice for all the mighty works that they had seen, saying, Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And when he answered and said unto them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. And when he was come near, he beheld the city and wept over it, saying, If thou hadst known, even thou, at least in this thy day, the things which belong unto thee, unto thy peace. But now they are hid from thine eyes. For the day shall come upon thee, that thine enemies shall cast a trench about thee, and compass thee round, and keep thee in on every side, and shall lay thee even with the ground, and thy children within thee, and they shall not leave in thee one stone upon another, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation.
All right, so now just parenthetically, Matthew relates the same story in less detail, but in chapter 21 and in verse 8, Matthew says, And a very great multitude spread their garments in the way. Others cut down branches from the trees and strawed them in the way. The trees in question were palm trees. So just like we have here on Miami Beach, you've got palm fronds. And they got those big branches that fall sometimes and hit your car or whatever. So they took those palm branches and put them on the road and put their clothes on the road, and they took the palm branch and they were waving them. Kind of like when you see movies about Cleopatra in Egypt or whatever, and she's on the litter being carried like on the bed, and they're like waving the big fan made of feathers. Well, that's what they were doing with the palm fronds, like waving like he was a king, because he was. And so we find that Luke keeps mentioning about, the Pharisees were upset and said, hey, this is wrong for them to say. Why? Because the people were saying, Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord, which was a reference to the Psalms. And Psalm chapter 118 verse 26 is a prophetic passage that says just that. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. That's what they were supposed to say when the Messiah, the King, the Son of David, shows up. And so when they were saying this to Jesus, the Pharisees got upset and said, hey, tell your disciples to tell the people to be quiet. And Jesus, who was always downplaying his bona fides as the Messiah, as the Son of God, as this miracle worker, and he was always saying, don't tell anybody what I did for you because the time is not yet. He would do a miracle and say, okay, now I want you to sign this NDA, this non-disclosure agreement. And they'd be like, yeah, okay, sure. And then they'd run into town and tell, and then Jesus would have to leave town because people would show up and like, hey, I heard you, fed 5,000 with just 2 fish or something. Do that again. Mm-hmm. And so he was always downplaying because he didn't want to overwhelm people's freedom of choice by doing miracles. He did miracles to show that he was in fact God, but he didn't want to win converts by magic tricks because he knew that if he showed his full power, he would overwhelm free will. If Jesus showed up as God, everybody would fall at his feet, and if he said, I'm the Lord, worship me, everybody would, okay, I will. But it would rob them of freedom of choice. So he kept his deity contained and emphasized, rather, his humanity. It was important under the law of Moses for there to be a real son of Adam, a real kinsman redeemer. Remember, under the law of the kinsman redeemer, we look at Leviticus chapter 25, we look at those different passages that talk about if one guy is going to redeem the land for another, he has to be a close blood relative. And if that guy falls in debt and can't pay, the mortgage on his house, only a close blood relative can come in and pay the debt back and redeem back that which was lost. Couldn't be a friend from down the street or one of your buddies from high school, had to be a close blood relative. And that law was put in place in Leviticus to foreshadow the coming of the Messiah. Jesus couldn't just be God and show up like he did on Mount Sinai in Arabia when he spoke to Moses and carved the 10 Commandments with fire from the tip of his finger and handed to Moses. He showed up then. He couldn't just show up and say, okay, I'm going to be the Messiah and die for your sins. One, because he wasn't a man. He showed up in his pre-incarnate form. He was just God the Son. And that's what Moses saw, the burning bush, and he showed up. Remember, he was a tornado during the daytime as he led Moses across the Red Sea, and during the night he showed up as a tornado on fire. And so that was Jesus. We find out later when we go to Paul's writing in the book of Corinthians, we find out that the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night was none other than the rock. And that rock was, Paul finds out, that rock was Christ. Wait a minute. Cecil B. DeMille never gave Jesus a credit in the conclusion of the 10 Commandments. After watching 6 hours of Yul Brynner, you didn't see that in appearing as the pillar of cloud, pillar of fire, Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. So, I just thought it was God the Father, But it really was actually Jesus interacting with man on behalf of the Father. And so we had to have God in human flesh. God the Son had to become an actual man to be able to be eligible to die as the Passover lamb for whom? Not the angels. The angels don't have a redeemer. But for the sons of Adam. He had to become a son of Adam. That's why he kept referring to himself primarily, not as the Son of God, even though he was. He kept referring to him by the phrase what?
Son of Man.
The Son of Man has come but to seek and save that which was lost. The Son of Man did this. The Son of Man does that. When he talked about himself in the third person, he didn't refer to himself as the Son of God until he was forced to at the very end when he was on trial. But he emphasized his humanity. Why? Because he wanted to establish his bona fides as the substitutionary sacrifice. You had to have a co-equal sacrifice. A lamb for a lamb. And that's why lambs could only temporarily, for the coming year, expiate the sins of the people. Because people aren't lambs, and lambs aren't people. So a pure, unblemished lamb, okay, that would do the trick, but only for a few months at a time. You needed a real human being, but because God wasn't like Moloch or Baal or any of the satanic false gods of the Phoenicians or the Assyrians who demanded human blood sacrifice to satiate his thirst for blood, God didn't want any of the sons of Adam to die for the sins of the original Adam. One, because it wouldn't do any good. Because they have their own sins to die for. So they could die for their own sins, but it wouldn't help anybody else out. And two, because he was compassionate, he loved us. He had his son and he, before Adam was created, already had agreed that after Adam falls, he said, well, how do you know in advance? Well, because God can see into the future, because he's God. That's why he's God. He sits in a Goodyear blimp over the whole space-time continuum. And so, prior to Adam being created, they were already up there in the kingdom of heaven, talking about, okay, now we're going to create this guy Adam, and then, we're going to give him a wife because it's good for, not good for a man to be alone. And then his wife's going to get seduced by Satan with the whole goddess feminist thing. And then he's going to go along with it because he's in love with her, and we made her so beautiful he couldn't resist. And then he's going to fall, and then all his kids are going to be condemned to hell with Satan. So we're going to have to come in, and then Jesus wants you to take the role of the second man, the last Adam, and then I'll stick it to you for every human that ever lived, and we can get all of the human race off the hook. Sound like a good deal? Look, I agree. Sign me up. Send me. Who will go for us? Here I am, Lord, send me. So God the Father sent Jesus. Before Adam was even created, it was already agreed that he would go and die for the sin. Now, Satan, because he's not God, he didn't know any of these things. He's running around heaven as the anointed cherub that covereth, and then eventually, when he recognized his own glory and beauty, and decided, hey, I'm more glorious than all the other created beings in the universe, which was true, just like God was, except he wasn't God. So when he decided, well, since God and me are both the only entities in the universe that are more glorious and powerful than everybody else in the universe, we both should be worshipped as God. Except Satan was a created being. God is the creator of all the created beings. So Satan fell in love with his beauty and went mad, and as a result, hatched his plot to overthrow the kingdom of heaven and to establish his own kingdom here on the earth. And as a result, he got kicked out of heaven. And when he saw that God's plan for Adam and his descendants, the children of men, the sons of Adam and daughters of Eve, was to reign beside Jesus, to be co-regents with Jesus throughout eternity over all of the created angels and cherubs, he just couldn't take that. And I think that that was part of the reason why he set out to destroy the human race with such rage and bitterness. One, to punish God, hurt him by hurting his beloved children. And two, because he was envious of man, because one day man would be his overlord. We would be reigning and ruling over angels. The Bible says, at the great white throne of judgment, Jesus is going to judge the fallen men throughout all time, space of the 6,000 years, actually 7,000 years of human history when you include the millennium. But the redeemed sons of Adam are going to judge the fallen angels and decide where they're going to be assigned in the lake of fire. We're going to be given a lot of authority. That's why, all these people, from Lester Crowley to Jay-Z and Beyonce, have made a tremendous mistake by signing up with Satan in hopes of getting some great rulership position in the kingdom of Satan that is to come when the Antichrist is revealed. Because as soon as Satan doesn't need the children of men anymore, he's going to kill them off, torment them, and turn them into, a protein milkshake for the Nephilim that he's going to create. And as a result of that, they've been lied to. They don't have a future in the kingdom of Satan, even if Satan won, which he can't because he's fighting against God. So it's an absolute factual impossibility. There's no chance of a percentage that he could win the battle. If it was fought a trillion times, he would lose every time, right? Because there's infinite power, which is what God is, versus non-infinite power, which is what Satan is. Now, Satan may seem exponentially more powerful than me or you. He is exponentially more powerful, but he's not infinitely more powerful. Infinitely means forever, forever, forever. God is infinitely more powerful than me, which means he's exactly the same amount of power over Satan as he is over me. Why? Because we're both, compared over against infinity. So some people say, well, yeah, he's infinitely more powerful than you, but, Satan would be at least a little bit closer battle because Satan is the most powerful being in the universe. No, it would be exactly the same battle because infinite versus non-infinite is the exact same result. So God has infinite advantage over me if I got into a fist fight with him, and he would also have an infinite advantage over Satan, who, even though Satan's more powerful than I am, he's still not infinite. So he has no more chance of winning a fist fight with God than I do. Think about that for a while. Satan seems like a big deal here on the earth now, because he's got all this supernatural power and he doesn't have to adhere to the rules of physics and things of that nature since he's a spirit being who can take on physical manifestation at times. He seems like this big deal to people like Jay-Z and Beyonce who sell their souls to the devil in order to get a few baubles. But you know, those limousines and you know, music deals and the money and the sex and the drugs and the pleasure that they get, they only get for a little while anyway. How many of those people in Hollywood, by the way, I do a lot of reading on the entertainment industry. We got to do some entertainment law contracts and stuff like that. And, you know, I've sang in groups before and stuff like that. Christian music, though. And, you know, I look at these people, and I don't see any of them that seem permanently happy. I don't see any of them that seem happy long term. You see, like, one artist will be, you know, cat's meow for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And then, you know, Britney Spears, who, when she was 19 and 20 years, she was the greatest thing that ever happened to America. You know, America's teen heartthrob. Then a few years later, it just seems like she was cutting her hair off and she was attacking paparazzi with an umbrella and she was winding up in psychiatric hospitals because she is miserable being a slave of Satan. And that's what happens to the people in the entertainment industry, whether it's music, whether it's movies, whether it's television. They're happy for a little while, but once they get used to the pleasures of materialism, it can't satisfy anymore. And then they've signed that contract, and they've got to serve out their contract. And when the contract's up, then they die in a plane crash, or they get suicided, or you know they contract some rare form of cancer and they die overnight. And so they don't have anything to look forward to anyway. So they accepted a bad deal. They got just a few baubles for a little while. It's like, you know, when some of the American settlers came over and they bought Southwest purchase from the Indians for like some glass beads or something like that. Hey, look, I got some glass beads here. Look how pretty they are in the sunlight. Hey, I'll give you Nevada in exchange, And so that's the same type of deal that Satan is striking with everybody in the entertainment industry, everybody in Satanism, everybody in Wicca, everybody in the occult. You get a few baubles that, yes, in the sunlight they look pretty for a little while, but you find out if they're not permanent, then of what value are they? They're really of no value. You might as well have, a fake gold, wristwatch or fake gold chain, and say, well, then it fades. It's not good anymore. That's why people want real gold as opposed to fake gold. Fake gold looks good for a while. If it's gold electroplate, it wears off after a while. Same is true with all the material wealth of the world, because the Bible says that at some point in time, it's all going to burn. Everything in the world is going to burn up. I digress. I'm doing a little preaching now, and we were talking about the triumphal entry, but the two end up going. All these concepts end up intermeshing together, and that's what I was trying to do with tonight. Is we spent great detail on the crucifixion. We spent great detail a few weeks ago on the resurrection, and great detail on the ascension. And what we're trying to do is syncretize those things together so you can think of them as a whole. You think about the triumphal entry. The triumphal entry was what? It was the 173,880th day after the decree of Artaxerxes Longimanus in Nisan 10, 445 BC, or April 6, 445 BC, 483 years earlier to the very day, Jesus shows up on time. And that's what Jesus is talking about when he says, I tell you that if these should keep silent, the very stones would cry out. Why? Because today was the day. What day? The 69th week of Daniel, the day that the Messiah was supposed to be presented for 4 days observation so that he could be sacrificed for the sins of the whole world. And that's why, as Steve read, Jesus went on to say in Luke chapter 19, verse 42, if thou hadst known, at least in this thy day, the things which belong to your peace, but for now they are hidden from your eyes. For the days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment about you and surround you and close you in on every side and level you to the ground, speaking of Jerusalem and Israel, and your children within you. And he says, they will not leave in you one stone upon another because you did not know the time of your visitation. What visitation? When God became a man and presented himself to the leadership of Israel to be Messiah the King, they rejected him. They didn't recognize the people. They said, hey, Hosanna in the highest. But the governmental leaders, that's the sad thing about leadership. There's a lot of responsibility. When I stand up here and I got to teach the Bible, it's a whole lot of responsibility that I carry that you guys don't carry if you're not actually standing up and teaching the Word of God. Adam was the head of the corporate family that God set. The corporate head was Adam of the family, and the head of Adam was Christ. And so when Eve and Satan struck the deal where she would eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that sin was not imputed to her. When she got her husband to follow along after, the sin was imputed to him, and you never find in Scripture any reference to Eve's sin, because she wasn't the person God put in charge. She wasn't the person that God held responsible for the leadership, the future, and the legal responsibility for the entire human race. Adam was responsible, and so it was his sin debt. And so sin passes through his Y chromosome. Sin passes through the sons of Adam to the whole human race, and inferentially to the entire universe. That's why the whole universe has it. I remember a couple of weeks ago I told you about how there were a couple of wild animal attacks, where some guy was trying to poach some lions in Africa or something like that. Not only did he not, kill them and poach their skin and sell it to somebody, he got killed. But not only did they kill him, they killed him and they ate every part of his body except his head. They left his head and his face intact and ate everything from the neck down. There was nothing left of his body. And my friend Noah, who's the FCA director, who's invited us to come do our South Beach Gospel Evangelism thing at the Glory Run on April 21st, for those of you who are in Miami area on that day. He said, "Man, Herbie," he said, "even animals are pissed at us. Animals are mad, man. They know." He says, "They know in their spirit that we did something wrong. We screwed up the whole universe. And that's why they have to run around killing other animals to stay alive. They used to be able to eat grass and have a good day. They could play and sleep and run around and have a good time all day long and eat grass. Now they've got this craving for flesh and blood that they didn't have before, and they're angry about it because they know it's your fault. It's my fault. And so every now and again, even though God's put the mark on the man and says, animal kingdom don't do mean things to the people, and we've got dominion over the earth, we are losing our dominion because the animals don't respect us as much because we've entered into league with Satan. The animals, they know in their spirits. They know to fear and hate the demonic entities. They know to run away. Remember those pigs that Jesus allowed the demons to leave the man? And he said, "Give us permission to go into the pigs." And he's like, "It's permitted." As soon as those demons hit that herd of pigs, they were like, "Oh no, we'd rather be dead than let these demonic, horrible entities live inside us." And they jumped in the river and committed suicide to escape from the demons. And so I think the animal kingdom senses the wickedness that's in the sons of Adam that aren't redeemed. And as a result, they do things like kill us and eat us, chop us in pieces. So when they ate the whole guy's body, and they said we didn't find anything but the camera, the gun that he was going to use to shoot him, and his head. And that's because the animal kingdom is pissed at us for what we did in listening to our wife in the Garden of Eden and screwing up the whole of the universe. Creation completely fell. So, okay, now let's take a look if we could. We got a little time. But goodness gracious, man, time goes by fast. Okay, let's take a look if we could at Exodus and see, if we could, what is it that Exodus kind of tells us about the various and sundry different reasons for the triumphal entry. Steve, take a look if you would, or Jimmy, if you would, read for us Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 through 3.
And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be unto you the beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak ye unto all congregations of Israel, saying, In the 10th day of this month.
This month that she's talking about is Nisan. On the 10th day of Nisan, this is for Ingrid, what happened on the 10th day of Nisan?
They shall take to them every man a lamb according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for a house.
Okay, now skip over to verses 5 through 7 for us.
Listen. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep of or from the goats. And ye shall keep it up unto the 14th day of the same month.
So which day?
The 14th.
So you take it on the 10th and keep it until the 14th day of Nisan, and then what do you do on the 14th day?
The whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening, and they shall take of the blood and strike it on the two side posts on the upper door posts of the houses where they shall eat it.
Okay. And yeah, read 7 as well.
Yeah, I think.
Okay. And let's see. Pop over and read for us verses 11 through 13.
And thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover.
Is our phrase Passover. Okay, and Passover, what does that mean? Read verses 21 through 23.
Okay,
Steve, you know?
Then,
Okay, go ahead.
then Moses called for all the elders of Israel and said unto them, draw out and take you a lamb according to your families and kill the Passover. Any ye shall take a bunch of hyssop and dip it in the blood that is in the basin and strike the lintel of the two side posts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of this house until morning. For the Lord will pass through to smite the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood upon the lintel unto the two side posts, the Lord will pass over the door and will not suffer the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you.
Okay, so there you have, right there, this odd reference in Exodus chapter 12 to the Passover itself. They're captives in Egypt, Israel is. And they say, okay, now here's what we're going to do. God's going to institute this program where on the 10th day of Nisan, you take a lamb, bring them into your house, and you check them out for 4 days. Now on the 14th day of Nisan, the little baby lamb has now become like a pet for your kids. You kill it and collect its blood, and you take the blood and you do a weird thing with it. You do this. You put the blood at the top of the door on the lintel and on each side of the door post, which if you drew a straight line through the blood swaths, you would have the sign of the cross in like centuries in advance of the birth of Jesus on the door to the houses of the captives in Israel. And so you would make the sign of the cross in blood, in lamb's blood, on the 14th of Nisan, and then after that, you would take that lamb and you would eat it that following night. So you would start eating the lamb after sundown, and you eat it with hate. So now it would be Nisan 15. You bring the lamb in the house on Nisan 10, keep it to Nisan 14th. Nisan 14th, you kill it, take the blood, put it on the door of your house, and that evening, as Nisan 15 begins, you have your Passover meal, where you're eating the lamb. And when the Lord sees the blood of the lamb on the doorway of your house, then the destroyer that he sends through the land will pass over you as opposed to come in and kill your firstborn. This is a picture or a type of the sacrifice that Jesus made for us on the cross. Because it was a lamb in ancient Israel in Exodus, it could only work for a few months at a time. So you had to repeat the ceremony again and again and again and again every year. But when Jesus came, he says, this is a sacrifice once for all time. Catholics are wrong. Jesus is not being crucified again and again and again throughout the land every time Catholic Mass is being held. I hate to be mean to Catholics, but they deserve meanness. At least the Catholic leaders, the Vatican and the Pope. Interestingly enough, I read an article today that was written by a professor at the College of the Holy Cross, very prestigious Jesuit university, probably the most prestigious Jesuit university other than Georgetown University, which was, the first Catholic university in the United States of America. But this professor at Holy Cross wrote an article saying that in light of the Passover, and it was just published a couple days ago, said that Jesus was probably some type of transgender male who had gender identity issues. And he said that the repeated references that Jesus made to water was, in fact, a sexual reference. He says, he talked a lot at the Last Supper. He was talking too much, and he made reference to water. He was being very emotional. He said those were attributes that ancient Jews would attribute to women. So he was showing his effeminate tendencies, and that when he was talking to his father, he said, he's talking about being pierced. This professor actually made it a metaphor, like Jesus was metaphorically talking about being penetrated by his father sexually. He said it was like a sadomasochistic sort of sexual rite that Jesus was undergoing. And people were like, what on earth? A Catholic priest, or a professor at a Jesuit Catholic university has written this article within the last few days and published it. And people are like, has the world gone mad? Has the Catholic Church become that depraved that they're allowing their most prestigious Catholic universities to espouse absolute heresy, blasphemy, and abominations, accusing Jesus of being a transgender male who was being raped by his father during the crucifixion? It's an outrage. And so I just point that out to show you that 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, God is giving the people the abominations that they want. Catholic Church is the most popular Christian denomination in the history of the world. Got more members than any other Christian organization or any other religious organization. And it is a sign of the times that the biggest Christian, and I say that quote, pseudo-Christian, quote, I would call it, is espousing absolute heresies against the Lord Jesus Christ. It's one thing for the Pope to say that he believes in evolution, and I think the Pope just recently said a few days ago that he doesn't believe in hell. That
Today, yeah. So
was that today? I didn't get to that because I was so gobsmacked, as the British would say, over that Jesus was a transgender, sadomasochistic homosexual that was raped by God the Father. I didn't get to the Pope thing. What did it say about the Pope?
Basically, he was just saying that, if there's such thing as hell, and the souls of the sinful just disappear.
And it shames me that I have a degree from Georgetown University, Jesuit University, because the Pope, he's the first Jesuit Pope ever. Jesuits they're on a roll this year, these, assassins of the Catholic Church and the doctrinal leaders of the church. But yeah, so the Pope just declared that there is no hell, and one of the most prestigious Jesuit Catholic universities in America says that Jesus was transgender, homosexual, sadomasochist. And so that's the state of affairs here in the United States of America. We're not talking about some Muslim over in Saudi Arabia saying the Muslim, even though they're not Christian, they would never defame the name of Jesus by suggesting that he was a homosexual or that he was a sadomasochist, a sexual deviant. No, because even though they don't accept him as the Son of God, they at least revere him as this great prophet whose name should be respected. But here in America, a so-called Christian organization, the largest one on earth, is saying these abominable things. Hell doesn't exist. Jesus said it did. Well, the Pope has now changed, doctrine. He says it doesn't exist. How did he justify that, by the way? I didn't read that out.
I just caught part of it. Just where, I guess we've now gotten to a point that that's not the case. You don't go to hell, you don't suffer in eternity, you just disappear. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay, so Jesus, newsflash of Jesus, you didn't have to die on the cross. Sorry.
Yeah.
None of us are going to hell anyway because the Pope just told us. He died to save us from an eternity in hell. He didn't die because he didn't have anything better to do that day on Nisan 14 of 32 AD. He died to save the sons of Adam from the curse of sin. So there is our Passover. There is our need for the Passover and how Jesus became the Passover after being crucified. Jesus' death on the cross, just really, it's an exciting thing, and he says that he's the bread of life. And when we look at the Last Supper that Jesus celebrated during the preparation for the Passover, the night before he was crucified, the night before he was arrested, we find out that Jesus said that when we have communion or you have a Passover celebration, you're no longer going to commemorate the exodus of Israel from captivity in Egypt, but the exodus of the human race from the captivity of sin to the freedom of life. And we kind of look at, if you would, Steve, flip over to John chapter 6 and read that whole passage there from 47 to 58 regarding Jesus, one, declaring himself to be God, by using the divine name of God, but then making reference to himself as the bread of life. This is what's actually happening in the Passover celebration or the Last Supper celebration in John chapter 14. Read for us John chapter 6, verses 47 to 58.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me hath everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers did eat manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which cometh down from heaven, that a man may eat thereof and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If any man eat of this bread, he shall live forever.
Wow, now wait a minute, Steve. What's that Wonder Bread? My mom gave that to me when I was a kid, all that white starchy stuff. And everybody I know that's eating that has died or is on the way to dying. So it wasn't Wonder Bread he was talking about. He says, if you eat this bread, you'll never die. Continue.
And the bread that I will give is my flesh, which I will give for the life of the world. The Jews therefore strove among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Then Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, except ye eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, ye have no life in you. Whoso eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood hath eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is meat indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He that eateth my flesh and drinketh my blood dwelleth in me, and I in him.
Wow, so now he's talking metaphorically, of course, about his flesh being, bread and his blood being drink. And we know that because he took a loaf of bread sitting at the table and he broke it and said, here, take this and eat. This is my flesh. He wasn't talking about take a bite out of my arm. He grabbed a loaf of bread and broke it and said, this is the symbol of my flesh that you would take and consume and appropriate into your body to receive the nutritious benefits. And so this is what he instituted during the Last Supper, which is confusingly sometimes mistaken for the Passover. So remember, this is that Wednesday night dinner on Nisan 13 from about 6 p.m. onward or whatever, from 4 to 10 p.m. I would say, Nisan 13 into 14, he's having the Last Supper in the upper room with the 12 apostles, the upper room discourse. And it's after midnight, remember, that he goes to the Garden of Gethsemane, and now on Nisan 14 he's arrested, and during the early morning hours prior to sunrise he's put on trial by Pontius Pilate, by Annas and Caiaphas of the Sanhedrin, and by Herod, and eventually he is sentenced to die on the cross, and he's crucified at about 9 a.m. He's on the cross till about 3 p.m. That's Nisan 14. After sundown, he's already in the grave, right? Because now, after sundown, now Thursday night, Thursday afternoon turns into Friday night, under the Jewish accounting. At 6 p.m. you switch from one day to the next as opposed to at midnight for us. So at 6 p.m. it went from Nisan 14 to Nisan 15, the beginning of the Passover. The special high Sabbath Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we have in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 6 and 7, which we'll have Steve can flip over to that real quick. So Jesus is in the grave now on, what for us is Thursday night. It's now Friday after sundown in Israel, Nisan 15. He's in the grave, and everybody in the land of Israel is enjoying the Passover lamb, which has just been sacrificed a few hours earlier. And so now we go to Nisan 16. Jesus is in the grave for the third day on the regular Saturday Sabbath, right? We got the first day he's in the grave is on Nisan 14 before sundown. And then the second day is Nisan 15, he spends the whole day there. And then Saturday, we got the third day that Jesus is in the ground, which is Nisan 16. This is the regular Saturday Sabbath. So the disciples and the women that were followers of Jesus couldn't come to the grave on Saturday to dress the body in the ritual way. And they couldn't do it on Thursday because they didn't have enough time. They had to get him in the grave before the sun went down because they would have violated the Passover and made themselves unclean. So you got Thursday, one day, Friday, second day, Saturday, the third day. Sunday, you don't have the fourth day of Jesus in the grave because he's up and out before sunrise. You don't have a sunrise service at Easter to celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus arose during the darkness prior to the sunrise. He spent 3 days and 3 nights. He didn't spend 4 days and 3 nights. He spent 3 days and 3 nights in the grave. So there you have it. You got your night 1, night 2, night 3, and you got day 1, day 2, day 3, and you have them up and out before sunrise on Sunday on Nisan 17. So read for us real quick what it says in Leviticus chapter 23. Always nice to look at Leviticus. Strange book, but it does have its purposes. Verses 6 and 7. Chapter 23.
And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. And in the first day ye shall have a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein.
Okay, so see what we have here? We find out that there's even a special verse and chapter on when you eat the Passover lamb. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Passover ceremony can't be eaten until the 15th of Nisan. Nisan 15 starts after sundown on Thursday. So Thursday night would now be Nisan 15 in Israel. That's when you eat the Passover lamb. That's why they had to hurry and get Jesus buried. Because now you got to go to Mary Magdalene's house and sit down and eat the Passover lamb that had been presented 4 days earlier. Jesus isn't being eaten. Jesus is in the grave. So he's in the grave after having paid back the sin debt, waiting to fulfill the prophecy relating to the 3 days and 3 nights, which is why Catholics are definitely wrong. When the Pope says there's a special rule now, Good Friday is a special high holy day, and if you do this on Good Friday, you automatically spend 1 week less in purgatory or something. There isn't 3 days and 3 nights between a Friday and Saturday, no matter how you slice it. If this is the day Jesus is crucified on a Friday, tell me how you would get 3 days and nights from Saturday and Sunday. You could get 1, 2, maybe if you counted Friday as part of the day, you'd get 3 days, but you would only have 2 nights. You'd have Saturday and Sunday. You couldn't get 3 days and 3 nights, no matter how you slice it or dice it from a Friday crucifixion. And do we know that Jesus says anything about 3 days and 3 nights? We know that he did say, just as Jonas would spend 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so must the Son of Man spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. So Jesus has to be crucified on Thursday. It works perfectly with Sir Robert Anderson's calculations that 32 AD, April 6, 32 AD, was a Thursday when Jesus was crucified on Nisan 14, and he rose before sunrise on Sunday, Nisan 17, which gives you 3 days and 3 nights. The Bible says exactly to the day, perfectly right, to the last comma, parenthetical, and apostrophe. So we can trust the Word of God because it is mathematically precise, grammatically, and historically concise to the day. None of the other holy books of the world are. Let's take a look now at what Paul wrote, I think it was Paul, in the book of Hebrews, in Hebrews chapter 9, if you could, Genevieve. Flip over there and read for us verses 11 and 12 first. Or Steve, if you're there. You there? Okay, read for us 11 and 12.
But Christ, being come a high priest of good things to come by a greater and more.
Start over.
Yeah. Okay.
Hebrews 9, verse 11 and 12.
Glasses got it. I think it's that time, man. But Christ being come a high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood, he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us.
How many times?
Once.
Okay, so there we have, get rid of Catholic, masses where you have the holy bread and the water, and the monstrance where they keep the little wafer, supposedly as the hangout place where Jesus' flesh and blood is held every Sunday. No, once for all times. When you celebrate Passover now, it's a symbolic representation of the presentation of Jesus as the Passover lamb. He was sacrificed once for all time, Jesus. Verse 16, Steve. Hebrews chapter 9.
And for this cause, he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance.
Read that again, because that's key.
Sure. 16, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. For where a testament is, there must also,
Wait, did you read 16?
see, I read 15 first.
Okay, read 15 again.
Okay. And for this cause, he is the mediator of the New Testament, that by means of death, for the redemption of the transgressions that were under the first testament, they which are called might receive the promise of eternal inheritance.
Okay, so by means of death, we get our eternal inheritance. That's the fancy, phraseology that Steve just read. In essence, it's saying, by the means of the death of Jesus, we get to receive our eternal inheritance, which is the reign and rule of Christ forever. Now, verse 16, Steve.
For where a testament is, there must also of necessity be the death of the testator.
And read verse 22, and we'll finish up with Hebrews there.
And almost all things are by the law purged with blood, and without shedding of blood is no remission.
Okay, so we know that there had to be a shedding of blood for the remission of sins. Jesus had to die on the cross. So that is the whole purpose of the Passover, the triumphal entry. Triumphal entry is what? To signal to Israel, hey, the Messiah has shown up just on cue, 483 years to the day after Daniel prophesied that it would happen. I'm here. Acknowledge me as the king, or you're going to face, the destruction of the nation because you didn't know the day and they didn't accept them. And he then prophesied that Israel's going to go into captivity and Israel's going to be scattered around the world, and they weren't brought back to 1948. And this year, May 14th, we're going to celebrate the 70th year since God regathered Israel out of the scattering amongst the Gentile nations, which is a prophetic event of such great significance. I cannot contain my excitement, and I cannot emphasize to any of you enough the importance of May 14th, 1948. That was the day that the dry bones prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39 was fulfilled, when God brought overnight the nation Israel, which had ceased to exist for 2,000 years because they didn't understand that on Nisan 10 of 32 AD, that Jesus was the Messiah, they had to disappear from the historical landscape for 2,000 years. And then after the 2,000 years, God would bring them back overnight. Ezekiel chapter 38, 37, 38, 39. Dry bones prophecy. Can these bones live again? Oh God. And sure enough, they did. This year, on May 14th, will be the 70th anniversary of that supernatural event where Israel was recreated by God from out of the nations. And so, I don't know, but maybe that 70th year, that birthday, holds some prophetic significance relating to the rapture and the rise of the Antichrist. Antichrist can't arise until the church gets out of here first. And then the 70th week of Daniel, the 69 weeks have already run. But the 70th week has been interrupted by what? The church age, which has lasted for 2,000 years. Now, after 2,000 years of church age, Israel's been brought back into the land, and for the last 70 years, she's existed. This is the 70th anniversary of that supernatural event. And so, I think something big may be about to occur here in 2018 or shortly thereafter. So, we'll see, because we'll be here until the rapture, and then we won't be here. And so, okay, so that's what we find in Hebrews. Now, we'll flip over, if we could, to the Gospel of John, and let's take a look at and this will be the last time, we'll take a look at, the upper room discourse, but just for those of you at home that are looking for that 3 days and 3 nights, Jesus made reference to that in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40. It says, just as Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so must the Son of Man spend 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And so that does away with the possibility of Friday crucifixion, so there's no Good Friday there. So, okay, so now Steve, if you would, John chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. This is the Last Supper. This is the dinner that Jesus is having with the apostles on Wednesday, Nisan 13, the day before the actual Passover sacrifice of the lambs, and then the Passover supper later that evening. So, read for us what happens in that upper room discourse at about 4 p.m. on Nisan 13, which is a Wednesday night.
Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. How far?
Yeah, just the two,
Just
and
worship.
and so supper being in it. So that was the supper that Jesus celebrated with the disciples. That was before Judas betrayed him. That was before the Passover, because the Passover didn't come until later. We're going to look at a couple verses to prove that. Now let's go over to one of my favorite chapters in the Bible, John chapter 14. And this is where we're going to hear Jesus, now that Judas has departed, he's sitting with the 11 disciples, 11 apostles, his inner circle. Now Judas has departed to go betray him to the chief priests of the temple and to tell him, hey, this guy hangs out after dinner in the Garden of Gethsemane. That's where you can arrest him. So now that Judas is gone, Jesus is with his 11 guys. And this is what he tells them in verses 14, chapter 14, verses 1 through 3.
And let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also.
Wow, now wait, if that's not the rapture, what in the world is he talking about? I'm going away to my Father's house. His father isn't Joseph. Joseph is already dead. He's going to his Father's house in heaven to prepare a place for us. But don't be worried, because if I go away to prepare a place, you're going to come again and receive you to myself. He's not going to come back to the earth. He's going to come back to the heavens above the earth and bring us from the earth up into the first heaven, and then take us across the second heaven to the third heaven where the Father's house is, where the mansions are waiting for us. He says, if I go away, I'll come again and receive you myself, so that where I am, there you may be also. He's not saying where you are, I may be also. He's saying where I am, you may be also. So during the 70th week of Daniel, the final 7-year period of time that includes the tribulation and the great tribulation when Antichrist rules on earth, we're not going to be here. We're going to be in heaven at the Father's house with Jesus, waiting for it all to be over with, so that when he comes back at the end of the 70th week of Daniel, he comes back with his church to wreak havoc upon the kingdom of the Antichrist and throw Satan into the bottomless pit and the Antichrist into the lake of fire. And so, now, verse 6 of John chapter 14, very critical, very key.
Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me.
Okay, so Jesus is saying, remember he's using that divine name of God that was used on Mount Sinai with Moses when he received the 10 Commandments from God. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me and Buddha and Allah. Wait, wrong version. I'm sorry. King James says, through me, by myself. Not through me and Zoroastrianism, me and Islam, me and Lord Ganesha, the elephant-headed god of Hinduism, not through me and Ashtaroth, or me and Gaia, or me and Mother Earth, or whatever, Mother Nature, however you want to refer to it. It was Jesus alone. It's saying the only way that human beings can get to heaven is through me. I'm not saying that. I didn't learn that from Gabriel McGee or Dave Hunt. I learned that from reading the Bible when I was a kid, and I saw that Jesus said that. So that is one of the most incredibly important doctrinal verses in the whole of Scripture, right alongside John chapter 3, verse 16. Because he's saying all these other ways that the Catholic Church has been promoting to us over the years that you can get into heaven, all these other ways that Billy Graham, who I think was a Luciferian, counterfeit, false, apostate, pseudo-Christian faker, who said that there were other ways to get into heaven than Jesus, and that some people who lived the righteous life will wind up in heaven. Dave Hunt, kind of sarcastically say, yeah, according to Billy Graham, all these people that are following Hinduism and Buddhism, if they were really good at it, they're going to wind up in heaven with Jesus and not know how they wound up there. Even atheists and secular humanists who are good and kind to animals and volunteered at the homeless shelter didn't even believe in God. I'm going to wind up and find themselves in the kingdom of heaven like maybe how in the world I get here? It's kind of funny, but it makes an excellent point. Like, you don't even have to believe in Jesus anymore to get to heaven. Just be a good person. But Jesus said, who is good? When he sat down with the Pharisees, remember he got invited, at the beginning of his earthly ministry, he was doing miracles, and so some of the key guys in the Sanhedrin really respected him. So they invited him over to the Sanhedrin for lunch one day. And they had some of the guys who were on his side, some of the guys that weren't. And I think they did it at the house of Joseph of Arimathea, maybe it was. I forget whose house, whose house it was. But it was one of the, the guys, the leaders in the Sanhedrin, invited him over for lunch. And remember when the prostitute came in and she cried at his feet and she wept and he said, hey, when Joseph, when you invited me out, you didn't, hug me in greetings or weep at my feet. He said, since the time she's come in here, has not stopped weeping over my feet and drying my feet with her hair. And then he went on to say that he who is forgiven much loves much. And so he was making that point that he had come to be the Redeemer for sinners. Not, the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost. If you're already found, he doesn't need to come to find you. But then as he was having that discourse at that same lunch meeting, he said, okay, what's the heart of the law? Nicodemus tells him that, here is the Lord our God. He's one God. You shall love the Lord your God with your whole heart, your whole soul, and whole mind. And Jesus said, you're not far from the kingdom of heaven, Joseph of Arimathea. You said rightly. And so he said, and the other, laws like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself and all that. And so then he says, but we know that the Torah is the law of life, and that, that the law gives us a guidepost to do good. And when we're righteous, it shows that we have to be righteous before the Lord. It helps us get saved. And he says, but who is righteous in the eyes of the Lord? That was the point. He was like, yeah, you're right, Joseph of Arimathea. The law does direct you in the things you need to do to be righteous before the Lord. So yeah, it's good to that extent. But he says the catch-22 is, but who's good in God's eyes? Not in you guys' eyes, but in God's eyes. None of you guys are good. So the law can't help you. The law can only tell you that you're doomed, but it can't help you get undoomed. That's where grace and mercy has to come in. That's why God had to intervene in the form of a man in the person of Jesus of Nazareth. Okay. Now let's flip over, Genevieve, if you would. John chapter 18, verse 28.
Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early, and they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover.
Okay, so when they've already tried Jesus in front of Caiaphas early in the morning of Nisan 14, which is this Thursday morning. This is earlier this morning, before sunrise, he would have been at Caiaphas' house getting tried. After they asked him, it's like, I adjure you by the Most High, who do you claim to be? Are you the Son of God? And Jesus said, I am. And the high priest tore his clothes and set his hair, he sprayed lighter fluid in his hair, and they said, Joseph, give me a match. And he set his hair on fire. Right? No, Jimmy was like, what? I didn't know they had lighter fluid back then. No, I'm using a little bit of dramatic license. But metaphorically, in his mind, the high priest was so outraged when Jesus finally, face to face, under oath, they said, I adjure you by the Most High. I'm putting you under oath. Now you have to answer. I don't want to hear any secondary, metaphorical twist. I am commanding you under the law of Moses to answer truthfully. Are you the Messiah, the Son of God? And he said, I am. And when he used that divine name of God, the high priest lost his mind, tore his clothes, like I said, metaphorically, he sprayed a lighter fluid in his hair and set his hair on fire. Like, okay, what more? This man is going to die, and he's got to die today. Take him straight to Caiaphas, straight to Pilate's house, and tell him that he's a blasphemer. And Steve just read. Read it again, Steve? Because this is what happens. After Jesus declared himself to be God, they sent him to Pilate to be condemned to death. And John chapter 18, verse 28 says, what happened now?
Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. Okay,
so the reason why they couldn't go into Pilate's house, the judgment hall, is because under the Levitical rules, the Mosaic rules, you can't go into the house of a pagan the same day as the Passover because you would be ritually defiled. You wouldn't be able to sit down and eat the pure, spotless Passover lamb. And so you know that this was a Thursday, and you know that the Passover hasn't begun yet, because as they're taking Jesus from being tried by Caiaphas to now being tried by Pilate the morning before he gets crucified, they can't go into Pilate's house because they know that later that night they have to eat the Passover. which means that what Jesus ate the previous night with the disciples wasn't the Passover, right? Okay, it's just so plain and obvious, you don't need to be confused about these things. So no, when the Passover is referred, sometimes the same way we refer to Christmas. Christmas is like whenever school gets out on December 18th for some schools, December 19th for other schools, and then you go back the first Monday after New Year's Day. That's called Christmas. Yeah, where we at? Christmas break. What did you do for Christmas break? I went to the Rose Bowl, I opened some presents, went to my grandmother's house, went to my girlfriend's house. That whole period of time is referred to as Christmas. And that's the same way with the Passover. But specifically, the Passover night didn't start until Nisan 15. Jesus is being taken to Pilate the morning of Nisan 14 to have him condemned to death. So they couldn't go in Pilate's house because they had to eat dinner that night after sundown on Thursday, which was the Passover. So, John chapter 19, verse 31, Steve, since you're in John.
The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation, that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for the Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away.
Okay, so there you go. There's your verse right there that talks about that Sabbath day wasn't the regular Saturday Sabbath, but because it was the preparation day. The preparation for what? For the Passover, stupid. That they could eat that later on. That the body should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath. For that Sabbath was an high day. In other words, the Sabbath that they had to take Jesus off the cross to not desecrate wasn't the Saturday Sabbath, but the special high Sabbath. Saturday Sabbaths aren't high Sabbaths. The special Sabbath, which we found out was in 25 AD and in 32 AD, and every 7 years, is the special Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the beginning of the Passover. And that year, it fell on a Friday. So Thursday, they had to get Jesus off the cross. So now that gives us an excellent point there. We've already we did the triumphal entry, we did the Passover, we've looked at the crucifixion of Jesus, and we're going to look at the resurrection real quick. But let's take a look just a little more in detail, because I like the interplay, if you will, between Pilate and Jesus relating to the crucifixion itself. So let's go ahead and have you guys take a look with the time we have remaining at the interplay between Pontius Pilate and Jesus himself. Let's take a look at John chapter 18, Steve, starting at verse 28, where you just left off. Run down all the way through verse 40.
Then led they Jesus from Caiaphas unto the hall of judgment, and it was early. And they themselves went not into the judgment hall, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover.
Just learned that, okay.
Pilate then went out unto them and said, What accusation bring ye against this man? They answered and said unto him, If he were not a malefactor, we would not have delivered him up unto thee. Then said Pilate unto them, Take ye him and judge him according to your law. The Jews therefore said unto him, It is not lawful for us to put any man to death, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spake, signifying what death he should die. Then Pilate entered into the judgment hall again and called Jesus and said unto him, Art thou the king of the Jews? Jesus answered him, Sayest thou this thing of thyself, or did others tell it thee of me? Pilate answered, Am I a Jew? Thine own nation and the chief priests have delivered thee unto me. What hast thou done? Jesus answered, My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, and I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now is my kingdom not from hence. Pilate therefore said unto him, Art thou a king? Art thou a king then? Jesus answered, Thou sayest that I am a king. To this end was I born, and for this cause came I into the world, that I should bear witness unto the truth.
And the way you would phrase it, he's saying, as thou sayest, I am a king. Basically, he's admitting that I am. And you see that in, I think, the Gospel of Luke in more detail, where he's actually admitting to being the king. But then he says, don't worry, because my kingdom is not from here. So Pilate's like, oh, so you are a king then. But go ahead, Steve, I digress.
Everyone that is of the truth heareth my voice. Pilate saith unto him, what is truth? And when he had said this, he went out again unto the Jews, and saith unto them, I find in him no fault at all. But ye have a custom that I should release unto you one at the Passover. Will ye therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Then cried they all again, saying, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a robber.
Wow. So here we see that Barabbas is about to get off the hook because the people called out for him. And so, you know, what happens next, Steve? We see that verse 19 continue on the interaction. Pilate sends Jesus out to get beaten up because he wants the people to feel sorry for him. So start us at John 19 and then run down through verse 11, verse 12, and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. Then Pilate therefore took Jesus and scourged him. And the soldiers platted a braid of thorns and put it on his head. And they put on him a purple robe and said, Hail, King of the Jews. And they smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again and saith unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that ye may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Jesus forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate saith unto them, Behold the man. When the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Crucify him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Take ye him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him.
I was trying to get Jesus off the hook here.
The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer.
Whence art thou? Where are you from, kid? Are you from Galilee, Nazareth, or are you from like maybe somewhere like heaven? Because I'm hearing strange things about where you're really from.
Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee and have power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee hath the greater sin. And from henceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend.
Let me stop you right there. My goodness, can you see what's happening here? Jesus had sat down and had a face-to-face with this pagan governor who's just trying to administer Roman law on behalf of Caesar and save his job. And in the space of 5 minutes, he's almost converted Pilate into becoming a believer. He says from then on, Pilate sought to have Jesus released. And it wasn't until the leaders of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish high priest, threatened Pilate and said, if you let him go, you're no friend of Caesar. You might have to tell Caesar that I don't know, maybe that might affect your governorship here, buddy. And so now they're extorting him. We're going to tell Caesar that you're a rat and you supported this rebel king of the Jews and that you're no real supporter of... Can you imagine the Jews are extorting the Roman governor? And so, continue on there, Steve. Whoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar.
Okay, and how far you want me to go up?
Verse 13,
Okay.
read down to, read all the way through to 19.
When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Jesus forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the pavement, but in the Hebrew, about Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, and about the 6th hour.
Is that clear enough? The preparation of the Passover hadn't happened yet. Okay, go ahead.
And he saith unto, this was the Passover, and about the 6th hour, and he saith unto the Jews, Behold your king.
6 hours, 9 a.m.
But they cried out, Away with him, crucify him. Pilate saith unto them, Shall I crucify your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar.
Pilate is kind of sticking it to the
Yeah,
people now. So you extorted me. I can't get out of this. My wife told me not to have this guy crucified, but now because you're threatening my job security, I'm going to go ahead and do it, but I'm going to stick it to you. So he's like, shall I crucify your king? This is not our king. We got Caesar's our king. Stop it, And then verse 16.
Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be crucified. And they took Jesus and led him away. And he bearing his cross went forth into a place called the place of the skull, which is called in the Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him and two others with him on either side, one and Jesus in the midst.
Now here in verse 19, where Pilate gets his supreme comeuppance over the Sanhedrin and the high priest, he really sticks it to him here. Because now, instead of just having one of the soldiers do the thing, he writes out a bill of indictment himself, and this is what he writes in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. So everybody, all those thousands of people that are in town for the Passover can read this, and this is what he put over the head of Jesus.
And Pilate wrote a title and put it on the cross, and the writing was, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews.
He did it. It says in verse 20, then many of the Jews read this title. For the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. Everybody could see it. And it was written in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. Now, do you think Pilate is trying to stick it?
Yeah.
He's really sticking it to these Pharisees. Like, yeah, I'm going to kill him. But I'm going to tell everybody here that you're killing your king, Jesus of Nazareth. Not just Jesus of Nazareth, the crook. Jesus of Nazareth, the thief. Jesus of Nazareth, who's been found guilty. But Jesus of Nazareth, who is the King of the Jews. A pagan governor from Rome is declaring the glory of Jesus and giving him his proper title in the moment of his death because he's resentful that he's being forced to put this man to death. And the chief priests say, then the chief priest said to the Jews, do not write King of the Jews, for that he said, I am the King of the Jews. And Pilate looks at him, I'm sure he's laughing and sneering at him, and says, what I have written, I've written. Too bad, so sad. And so they went ahead and they divided his clothes and they crucified him. Verse 30, interestingly enough, Genevieve, what does it say occurs in verse 30? Well, go ahead.
When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, it is finished. And he bowed his head and gave up the ghost.
In verse 31?
The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was an high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away.
Okay, so we find out then, because this was the preparation day for the Passover, which was Nisan 14, and that the high Sabbath of the Feast of Unleavened Bread was about to start on Friday, Nisan 15. They only had a few hours left before sundown. That's why they asked, that Jesus, would have his legs broken so he could suffocate to death. But when they got to Jesus, they didn't have to break his legs because they saw he was already dead, because he had already told himself to die, because he had already found from the Father, okay, it's paid in full, and then he said to tell us that. Dad says it's okay. Sons of Adam, you're all good now. Now, body, you can die. And he told his body to die, and they did. He said, no man takes my life from me. I lay it down myself. I have the power to lay it down, and I have the power to take it back up again. This commandment I've received from God. He says that in John chapter 6 or John chapter 8, I forget which. And as a result, we find out 3 days and 3 nights later, we find out that's exactly what happens. And Steve, you can bring us home here. John chapter 20. Verse 38 says, Jesus is buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, being a disciple of Jesus, secretly for fear of the Jews, asked Pilate and was given permission to bury him in his tomb, which fulfills the 500-year-old prophecy about Jesus being born in the tomb of a rich man. Now we find out 3 days and 3 nights later, this happens. The first day of the week for the Jews is what day? Sunday, not Monday. First day of the week for Americans is Monday. When I was in Israel studying international law at Tel Aviv University's law school, the first day of the week, first day of classes, was always Sunday morning. And it was unsettling. I was like, well, it's Sunday. Like, no, that's the first day of the week. I was here in Israel, buddy, so get up and go to class. I had to go to class Sunday morning. It was very unsettling. But then Friday was a Saturday, so you could hang out and get on the bus and go to Jerusalem and hang out for the weekend. But you went, you had to stay the whole weekend because the buses didn't run on Saturday because it was a Sabbath. So you couldn't get back to Tel Aviv because the buses didn't run, because there was a national law that you couldn't run buses on the Sabbath, and the Sabbath was Saturday. So if you went Friday, you could hang out and party in Jerusalem, but you had to stay till Sunday morning. So anyway, okay. All right, so start us out, Steve, run down verses 1 through 10. John chapter 20.
The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark.
This is Sunday now. Sunday, Nisan 17.
Unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre.
Okay, so it's still dark. Sun hasn't risen yet. This is no sunrise service. It is nighttime still. Mary Magdalene gets to the tomb on Sunday morning before the sun rises because it's still dark out. And while it's still dark out, what does she see? The stone has been removed. And what does she see in verse 2 after she looked in the tomb?
Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and to the other disciples whom Jesus loved, and saith unto them, They have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple, and came to the sepulchre. So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he, stooping down, and looking in, saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter, following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes lie, and the napkin that was about his head, not lying with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went in also the other disciple, which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. For as yet they knew not the scripture, that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went away again unto their own home.
Wow, so we find out that Jesus isn't there, and then a little later we find out that Jesus actually appears to Mary Magdalene. And he sees her crying, this woman, why are you weeping? Who are you seeking? And she, supposing him to be the gardener, said unto him, Sir, if you've carried him away, tell me where you carried him, and I'll take him away. And Jesus said unto her, Mary. And when she looked at him, she said, Rabboni, which is to say, teacher. She recognized him. And she said, hold on, touch me not, for I have not yet ascended to my Father, but I go to my brethren. But go to my brethren and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, and to my God and your God. Now, we've got reconciliation with the Father. Mary Magdalene went and told the disciples. And so pick us up in verse 19, Genevieve, and run down through verse 25.
Okay. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Jesus and stood in the midst, and said unto them, Peace be unto you. And when he had so said, he showed unto them his hands and his side, and then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. Then said Jesus to them again, Peace be unto you, as my Father hath sent me, even so send I you. And when he had said this, the brethren on them, and said unto them, Receive ye the Holy Ghost, whosoever sins ye remit, they are remitted unto them, and whosoever sins ye retain, they are retained. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see in his hands the prints of the nails, and put my finger into the print of his nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. And after 8 days again, his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Jesus, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then said he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold thy hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. And Thomas answered and said unto him, My Lord and my God. And Jesus said unto him, Thomas, because thou hast seen me, thou hast believed. Blessed are they that have not seen, and yet have believed.
So we see that Jesus is now in his resurrection body, And by the way, we just got a text from our brother Rod, who's up in, I think, Central Florida. And Rod is saying, praise God. It's amazing. I only hear the truth from a chosen few. Keep teaching my brother. So thank you, Rod.
Thanks, Rod.
Appreciate that encouragement. You know, I always think about you. I always miss you when we don't get text messages from you. I always think, man, I hope Rod's still tuning in. So thank you, Rod, for that encouragement, man. That's true. As we get closer to the rapture, we're going to have fewer and fewer people in the so-called nominal church that are actually preaching and teaching the Word of God. Just like Ingrid was saying last week when she went to this big church on Palm Sunday, and they didn't even make reference to it. They he has no idea what the 70th week or the 69 weeks of Daniel and the Palm Sunday, what it really means. It's so refreshing that at your Bible study, we've already learned what all this means. So we know what these dates are, significant. But they're not teaching that in the commercial churches because the commercial churches are interested primarily in generating income. To generate income, you've got to get butts in the seat. To get butts in the seat, you've got to provide entertainment from 9 to whenever on Sunday, whether they want to or not. They know they got to pay the bills, so they're going to do the entertainment module as opposed to the gospel of Jesus Christ module. So, as Genevieve just read to us, Jesus is now in his resurrection body. He can walk through walls. He can appear and disappear at his command. Thomas, who was the doubter and said, unless I saw him die, unless I could stick my hand into the wound in the side and the nail prints in his hand, I'm not going to believe. And Jesus appears, peace be unto you. Thomas, reach forth your hand, son. And just kind of gave him a smack and I said, Thomas, don't doubt, don't be unbelieving, but believe. And he says, my Lord, my God. Job's witnesses claim that Jesus never claimed to be God. Why did he allow Thomas to refer to him as his Lord and his God? And then Jesus said, Thomas, Job's witnesses don't want you to believe that I'm God. I'm only the Archangel Michael. Don't call me that. No, that's not what he said. That's in the Job's Witness Bible. But in the real Bible, it says that he now responds to Thomas and says, Thomas, because you have seen me, you have believed. But blessed are those, he's now referring to us, who have not seen and yet believe. We're going to have an even bigger blessing than Thomas. Because Jesus never appeared to me, not in my bedroom. I know he appears in Benny Hinn's bedroom like every other week. And Oral Roberts and all these other Pentecostal money preachers on TV, they get these visits from Jesus. But that's the fake Jesus. So don't be upset or jealous. It's Satan in disguise. The real Jesus appears to Thomas. He says, but you don't have the same blessing that Steve and Ingrid and Herb and Rod are going to have. Because they believe without having seen. Why? Because they have trusted the Word of God, which means that they've exercised something that you weren't able to. What is that? The F word. Faith. Thomas had to see to believe. But faith says, I can trust the Word of God. It's already proven to me through the 69 weeks of Daniel that Jesus would appear 483 years to the day after it was predicted, and he did. Now I can trust the rest of the Bible. I don't have to see. I can believe because God has already proven himself. And so he says, don't be doubting, but believe. He says, blessed are those who haven't seen and have believed. I'm going to conclude us with the chapter 28 of the Gospel of Matthew, which also relates to the resurrection and what happens after the resurrection. It starts out in chapter 28, it says, now after the Sabbath, that's the first day of the week, began to dawn, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb, and it goes on to say that Jesus appears to him, and it says, wow, his appearance, actually these two angels appear, and it says their countenance was like lightning, and it says, do not be afraid, I know who you seek, Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen. We usually see that on the placards that they sell at Easter time or whatever. That's the verse they quote. He is not here, for he is arisen. And so a little bit later in Matthew chapter 28, it says, and as they went to tell the disciples, behold, Jesus met them and said, rejoice. And they came to him and they held him by his feet and worshipped him. Now, if he was not God, he should not have allowed these women to worship him at his feet. Job's witnesses say, he's not God and he never claimed to be. Why is he allowing himself to be worshipped? Only God can be worshipped. Remember when John fell at the feet of the angel in Revelation? Get up, John, get on your feet. I'm a servant just like you. Worship God. Wait, you're Archangel Michael, aren't you God the Son? No, I'm just an angel. Jesus is God. So, he goes on to say, Jesus said to them, do not be afraid, but go and tell my brethren to go into Galilee, and there they will see me. And then he goes on, and a little bit later, we get along to verse 16, we find out that Jesus makes yet another appearance post-resurrection from the dead. It says, then the 11 disciples, there are only 11 because Judas has gone out and hung himself now. He's so guilt-ridden over having betrayed Jesus for blood money, he went out and hung himself. Suicide is wrong, but at least it was a noble ending. He was like, at least he felt bad about his sin. Some people don't feel bad about their sins. This Jesuit, professor who wrote that Jesus is a transsexual, sexual deviant, he doesn't feel bad about having said that and published this to the whole world. The Pope doesn't feel bad about having contradicted Jesus by telling the world that hell doesn't exist. But Judas at least felt bad, so at least I respect him for that. And then it says, verse 18, then Jesus came and spoke to them, the 11, saying, all authority, that means he's God, all authority has been given to me in heaven and in earth. That means that now he has deposed Satan from the godship of the world. Adam was the chief regent over the planet Earth until he listened to the voice of his wife and bowed the knee to her, and in doing so, handed the title deed over, not knowing that he would have to, but he handed it over to Satan. Satan became the god of this world until Jesus dies on the cross and pays back the price of sin for the original Adam. The second man is the last Adam. That's Jesus, who undoes the deed that transferred the title deed from the human race from Adam, who was the regent governor of the planet Earth, and it was handed over to Satan when he bowed the knee to his wife, and he didn't realize that was going to happen. So all that time, Satan became the god of this world. Now he's still sitting on the throne of the god of this world because God hasn't deposed him from that, but he's a lame duck ruler, and his time is coming very shortly after the rapture. So Jesus says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and earth. Verse 19, go therefore and do what? Make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I commanded you. And look, I am with you always, even unto the end of the age. So the last thing that Jesus says here is the Great Commission. The Great Commission isn't go out and pay tithes to the biggest church you can find. The Great Commission isn't go out and join the choir or get on the usher board, get really pretty girls in the worship team and try to get as many young kids in there with rock music and dancers and fun and arts and crafts. No, the Great Commission is to go out to every ethnic group on earth and preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. That God in human flesh has come to the earth, died for the sins of man, and therefore purchased your entrance into the kingdom of heaven free of charge. That's what the good news is. The bad news is if you reject that offer that Jesus has already paid for, you spend eternity in the lake of fire with Satan. That was our lot prior to Nisan 17 of 32 AD. When Jesus rose from the dead, it completed the deal. The cross paid for our blood, and when he rose from the dead, it set it in place. So you needed the crucifixion and the resurrection. So you got a chicken egg problem. What came first? What's more important? The crucifixion of Jesus or the resurrection? They're both important equally because without one, you can't have the other. If you don't have both at the same time, then none of it works. The crucifixion, Jesus doesn't rise from the dead, your sins aren't atoned for because then he wasn't who he claimed to be. Okay, Jesus doesn't die on the cross and he rises from the dead, but he didn't pay for your sins, then what good does it do you? So we now find out that what Jesus is telling us to do, the last thing he says to Matthew in the Gospel of Matthew, is to go out and evangelize the gospel of Jesus Christ. John chapter 3, verse 16, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish in the lake of fire, but have everlasting life in the kingdom of heaven. That's the gospel. Very simple, very straightforward. Everybody can do that. And so those churches that aren't doing that are not doing the will of God. People who claim to be Christians that don't do that, you have to question, what is their relationship with Jesus? If Jesus died to save you, he's your God, King, Master, and Savior, you go out and do whatever he says. If he tells me to go wash his car, I go wash his car. If he tells me to go, put shoes on his camel, I go I don't know if camels have shoes on the bottom like horses do, but if they do, I go do that. If he wanted me to do laundry for him, I'd do it. But he doesn't ask me to do any of those things. He says, but go tell people about me. That's why when Noah sent back the workup of our southbeachgospel.com logo for the back of the race shirts, so it's right out there. You can come down to Miami for April 21st. That's when we're going to be doing our Fellowship of Christian Athletes code joint event where we're going to be evangelizing and participating in the race. So if you come down, maybe you can work at the table for us. That'd be great. We could have fellowship with you. But they sent back the proof, and the printer, seeing that I sent it over, he said, oh, I guess Well, he left his name out, so he put Herbert E. Walker III, SouthBeachGospel.com. He said it doesn't make any sense to put a name of a website without putting the name of the person. And I'm like, no, all right, you lost your mind. Take my name out. We're not promoting me. I'm not doing the law firm this year. I'm promoting the gospel. You don't need the name of a guy. Like, it's not like, Jay-Z presents the gospel of Jesus and people would tune in just because of the famous name and say, you don't need the name. You take my name and you make the font bigger for SouthBeachGospel.com. This is the website. You're like, oh, okay then, yeah. So now we got the bigger font because what we're promoting here isn't ourselves. We're not promoting Steve, we're not promoting Herb, we're not promoting Ingrid's website building abilities. We're promoting the gospel of Jesus. Get people to tune in. They're going to hear, but people won't know who you are. It doesn't matter. So if they tune in, they'll see me and they'll hear me talk, and they'll hear me talking about Jesus and getting saved. That's all that really matters anyway. They don't really need to know what my name is to believe the gospel or not believe it. Maybe I'm think that guy's a moron, he's lying, or he's stupid. Or, hey, that lines up with the truth. I don't really care who the guy's name is. As long as it's the truth, when we get to heaven, we can be introduced to one another. So, there you have it. I've gone a little bit over, but we had a lot to cover. And so, that's what we have. So, Rod, thanks for the encouragement. We have a special prayer request. We're going to close out in prayer. And so, that's the resurrection, crucifixion of Jesus as tied to the Passover and the triumphal entry and how they all fit together. And that's what we should be able to do. We should have Bible studies like this so we can learn this stuff well enough that when we get out into the streets, when we're doing evangelism like we're supposed to be doing, we can easily explain how these things happen. Like, well, why would a living God make his son die on the cross? He's a torturous, sadomasochistic monster to kill his own son. What kind of God does that? Then you can explain to him, he had to do it because of Adam. And when he, approached the triumphal entry, that was the 173,888th day, the completion of the 69 weeks of Daniel, that Israel was supposed to accept Jesus as the Messiah. And because they didn't, God had to allow them to be kicked out of the land of Israel for 2,000 years. But during that 2,000 years, this church age rose up and people got saved for free. And now that the church age is drawing to a close, the rapture seems to be about to occur. Maybe some prophetic significance again to the 70th anniversary of the nation of Israel, which will occur on May 14th, 2018, which is about 5 or 6 weeks away. So exciting times are coming, man. And then the rapture occurs, the church age ends, and the 70th and final week of Daniel can restart. And after those 7 years, where Antichrist will be ruling on the throne of this world, Satan will be ruling through him, then at the end of that 70th week, we get to come back from heaven in our new supernatural bodies with Jesus and watch him give a smackdown to Satan and the Antichrist. And then we take up our positions of leadership that we've been training all our lives for, all of our born-again lives, We've been saved for a while and we've done a lot of work. Ben, Steve, Genevieve, all you guys are relatively new to Christ in terms of years, but you're doing way more than most of the Christians I've known since I was a child because it means something to you. There's a fire in you called the Holy Spirit. And that's why you guys are doing the work of people that have been saved for decades. And work that some people have been saved 3-4 decades and don't have a single soul to show for it. Gosh, man, in heaven, that's going to be heaven's going to be great, regardless, better than hell. But there's going to be some folks that are going to be, man, I left a lot of loot on the table. I could have had riches and rewards forever. I could have had a great inside corner office next door to Jesus if I had just tried even a little bit to do something for the kingdom. But people get saved and then they get content and complacent. I'm going to get married, have a nice house, 2 cars in the garage, and I'm not going to go to strip clubs or commit sins. I'm going to go to heaven, but I'm not going to get too caught up in this crazy church stuff. I'm not going to get caught up in this crazy, fanatical, fundamentalist Christian stuff. Evangelizing, going out, no, only fanatics do that stuff. They'll look down on me at the polo club. And so, we don't want to be that type of Christian, because when Jesus comes, we want to have a resume, a portfolio of all the stuff we've done for him, so that we can get special assignments and special privileges with him, because he's going to reward based upon on the work that was done. He's honest, and he's going to be, the guys that didn't do much for him, they're saved. But the guys that did a lot, sacrificed a lot, suffered a lot, he's going to give them special rewards. I want special rewards because I guess I'm just that guy, I want it all, but I want it all then. Unlike Joel Osteen, who's getting it all now, but he's not going to have anything in the kingdom because he's not going to be in the kingdom. He's going to be in the lake of fire with Billy Graham. But goodness forbid, did I say that? Let me not end on a negative note. Jesus rose from the dead. He's our Messiah and our Savior. And he was crucified on this date in 32 AD and rose again before sunrise on Sunday. so that we could be free. And all we got to do now is just tell other people how to get saved. There's a cure to cancer, the cancer of the soul called sin. Jesus is the cure to cancer. And you will help cure those people by convincing them to take the inoculative shot, which is the blood of Jesus. And only we can do that. Jesus isn't going to appear as a burning bush and do it for us. We have to do it. And we get the privilege of getting rewards and honors and privileges of leadership in the kingdom that's coming by doing that. So I would encourage all of you to do that. That's all I'm going to say. I swear I'm going to stop right now. That's it. Okay, so now we have a special prayer request. My former intern from the state attorney's office, Christina, moved up to New York, worked in the fashion industry, got married, had a little kid, and she's going through a divorce. The guy's divorcing her, she's devastated, and she's like, Herb, you gotta pray for me. I said, well, it's great because I got my Thursday night Bible study group, and we're going to have the Bible study group put in a special prayer for Christina, and she was like, thank you so much, because, we're going through the last final months of the divorce. She doesn't want to get divorced, and it's just, it's terrible. And you got a young kid, and just, so, she's raised in Catholic Church and all that kind of stuff, but, when you need love and support, difficult times can bring you closer to Jesus. So, if you do the honors tonight, close out prayer, but throw in a special prayer for Christina, if you would.
Lord God, again, this little Bible study you just kind of cobbled together over the years. Lord, allow us to be able to get together on Thursday nights like this. And Lord, I hope first of all that we recognize that it's a rare thing. People, believers around the world, you have a lot more to deal with in terms of being able to meet together. And praise your name, Lord. Learn the gospel, learn the scriptures, and be able to go out and share them. Lord, I just thank you for this time that you give us here. Lord, I pray that Christina, the intern or former intern, Lord, that these times we're trying for, Lord, I just pray that this will be the desperate moment that she'll look to your Son Jesus for true comfort, for the peace that she's looking for this tough time that she's going through. And Lord, I pray that maybe our little study will be of help for her. Maybe she'll tune in and be able to glean a little bit of understanding the scriptures, Lord. And who knows, maybe even get saved. My goodness, would that be something? Lord, again, I just thank you for all those who are tuning in tonight. Lord, thank you for the triumphal entry, Lord, the time that you spent going from trial to trial, dealing with those knuckleheads, Lord, for taking Barabbas' place where we should have been. Lord, to save us, because otherwise we are just on our way to the lake of fire, Lord. That you said that we'll understand the gratitude that you gave us, what you did for us, and put aside all of that other garbage about, being ashamed or, nervous about not fitting in, Lord. That we'll be able to go out and share the gospel and really, kind of show that gratitude, Lord. Because if you did, what the Bible says you did, and if you believe what the Bible said that you did for us, Lord, it's just, you can't do but anything else but to go out and share that real good news with, those who haven't heard. Lord, again, thank you for preparation that you've gotten Herb in place too, for tonight, certainly, the Lord, all through all the years, for this evening and for this study to go as it is. Lord, again, thank you for this time of fellowship. Thank you most for your Son, Jesus Christ, and in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, Steve. It stops right there. Good.
Okay.
Right again.
All right.
I think that's it. You got the, with the
Right click.
Yeah, exactly. That's what
Yeah.
I think I'm hitting on.
Yeah, I've done that a few times.
Beautiful.
So yeah, man. So let's pray about the race thing and getting the funding. Oh, Vaughn tuning in. Vaughn says, thanks for another great study. We pray. So Vaughn's back in the mix.
Hadn't heard from him in a couple
At
weeks.
the beginning of in March, I'm going to Colombia to a wedding for a couple of days.
Oh, in March,
That's
okay.
March 2nd, I think that's a Thursday.
Oh, okay.
I'll come back.
March.
Colombia?
Colombia, yes.
Nice.
Yeah,
Like March or May?
May.
Oh.
Yes.
Or April?
No, it's May.
Oh.
May. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the correction, right? I met her when I was living in Boynton Beach, and we become really good friends. And her family has come, and I've met them, and they want me
Really?
to be at the wedding. So they actually.
Who's this person now?
Her name is Yolanda. She lives in Boynton Beach. She's got 2 kids, and I've been a friend for maybe about 9 years or so. And
Columbia's a place to retire these days.
but, well,
I was reading something the other day, like Medellin
What do you think,
and Bogota.
Maybe
yeah, but
some violence going on, but who knows? Some violence going on here.
Yeah, you got that right.
So I'm gonna ask Rod if he wants to come down.
He's got time. He's got leisure time to come on for a weekend. When's the last time we saw him anyway?
A long time.
Yeah, like it was what? I guess probably at Ingrid's house maybe twice before. Once or twice before we did that.
what's that?
Rod.
Rod,
Oh,
I don't know if you know him.
no,
Yeah, Rod's a character.
Yeah, but he's been faithful, man.
Yeah, I'll
He's
say that.
challenged me all the time, Vaughn and both of them. And that's nice, and they challenge you, and then after a while, it's like, you know what, you're legit.
Yeah, knows what he's talking about.
All right, I'm gonna give you some props. So, some more business week?
Nah, no been. I got a text from him just maybe a little bit before I left work today. He said he's not gonna be able to make it. No reason. I just got.
I know.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
almost about as done as I can be with people, and that's why this whole thing about the FCA co-sponsor, I said, man, I ain't got the money for that kind of stuff, and I don't want to call here and ask her about it and such and such. And then she ended up calling me on Sunday and asked, and she was so disappointed about going to church, and said, man, they didn't mention anything about the triumphal entry. It's Palm Sunday. Like, she said, I'm so thankful for the stuff I've learned in the Bible study, man, because
man,
they didn't say a single solitary word, and
She's
nobody said anything about it. She says it was outrageous. She said, I'm just thankful that I can get real food from the Bible study.
she's
with
not
you."
gonna get it anywhere else.
So I was like, wow, thanks a lot. So
That's
I'm gonna
good.
try to hit her up to see if she can help with the shirt feed. And I'm gonna go over and see if I can get some handbills made up that got our website on it that we can hand out at the
At
event.
the
So
event.
the way I'm thinking, there's gonna be corporate table set up, but what we're gonna do, we're gonna take those diagrams and the tripod. We're gonna be set up at Tropical Park, and the corporate guys are gonna, I think they let them set up around the track, the football stadium and the track, and the race will go around the park and end at the track. So you'll be sitting at the table
Yeah.
while we run,
Sure.
and then we'll get, Steve, you get some chick tracks, maybe even some of those Dave Hunt books. I don't know if,
Which ones? The non-negotiable gospel?
the thick one, blue one.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I had a case of them, and I went through all of them. I still have some of the little gold and red ones, but those blue ones, man, a
Those are
case
nice.
of those, I don't know how cheap we can get them for, but we maybe get our best chick tracks, we put them in our rack, take the chick track rack, because I was like, man, they invited me to set up a table. I was like, I don't have anything to give them. I was like, I'll just give them gospel tracks.
Yeah.
Most of those people might not even be saved. They're just religious people that like to go to church.
But you never know.
So you give them the gospel track, and then if we can get those little handbills with the website on it, and I was going to put some of the topics we talk about, end times prophecy, man, folks like that. So I'll show you what here's what I'm gonna have put on the back of the shirt. Because they had Herbert Irving Walker there. I was like, no, get rid of that and just give me the biggest letters I can get.
Awesome.
That's
on the
it,
back of the
man.
shirt.
Just
Yeah.
straight
You
up.
see God, Jesus, right? End time Bible,
Straight up.
like that.
That's,
Yeah, I'll be walking up and down with that shit.
So every time they put that shirt on and go to the gym, I still wear the shirts I got from the race from 2 or 3 years ago.
Really?
Every time I go to the gym, you see all those sponsors right on the back. So if you see southbeachgospel.com, it's incongruous. South Beach is partying and having fun. Gospel on South Beach.
On South
Let me
Beach?
check this
What
out.
is this?
Let me just
Yeah.
check
What
this
are they
out.
doing? Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
know. It is a catchy.
Yeah,
kind of
right?
thing. It is.
I think you're right with that
I mean, you
I
see
think
that,
we're-
contrast between the two.
and I think people have gone.
That's why I think that's true. I
'Cause
think
they're
you're
not sure
right.
what
Every
is-
time you go on South Beach,
Yes.
Yeah.
God is
Gospel
making them
here.
like default to South Beach.